from all around the world, fighting the good fight for us. Without them, there is no me, there is no you, there is no us, and you're not listening right now. All right. They're out there tearing it up right now, and we're celebrating the new year. So just think about that for a second. Do follow us on Twitter. We've got our old Twitter feed back, which is at JChurchRadio. All of the links are correct at jimmychurchradio.com, so you can go follow us. We picked up, after last week's show, like 300 followers, and that was just, I thank you for that. Keep it coming. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube. Go to the YouTube channel, which is Fade to Black. Everything is Fade to Black or J Church Radio. It's all simple. But do follow, subscribe, like, friend, do all of that stuff. Tonight we have a special show. We're going to go 3 straight hours with our guest, and I'll get to that in a second. You can email me throughout the show. You can email Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. We are monitoring everything. The producers here are reading everything, and if anything is worthwhile, I will read it. All right. The bumper music, as always, is Doug Aldridge from White Snake. I'd like to thank Doug. And also, you may remember last week, we posted up on jimmychurchradio.com a Giza viewer, a virtual viewer of the pyramids and the Sphinx over in Egypt. Now, that applies directly to tonight's show. But we had to move the Giza viewer. It's over on the contacts page, and there's reasons for that. It was the music that was playing and interrupting with this show. But you can go and check out that virtual viewer. It is absolutely amazing. Now, I am going to take a quick break, and when we come back, John Anthony West, Egyptologist? I don't think so. But he is the man when it comes to Egypt. This is KJCR Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, live from Burbank on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We'll be back right after this. Stay with us. What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National tax experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. Doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil 3-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. KJCR, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. We are on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We are live all around the world right now. Do follow us on Twitter, Facebook, all of that stuff. Coming up tomorrow, I talked about John Teeter on last Friday's show briefly. Tons of email about it. And I was just rambling thoughts. Tomorrow night, we are going to have the return of John Teeter. Another special, another New Year's special. And we are going to have on the attorney for the John Teeter Foundation, the Teeter family, Larry Haber. and he was tough to get on the show, but he heard what we had to say last week. He checked out the stuff on YouTube, and he said, absolutely, I want to come on. He has got some breaking news about John Teeter. So tomorrow night is a show that you're not going to want to miss, okay? All right. Well, we are broadcasting live right now from sunny Burbank, and it was a warm day today. And just to paint a little picture for you, I'm sitting here in shorts right now. And our next guest is not. He's hold on, John. He's in upstate New York. Okay, let's get straight to it. Author, lecturer, and guide John Anthony West delivered a seismic shock to archaeology in the early 1990s when he and Boston University geologist Robert Schoch revealed that the Great Sphinx of Giza showed evidence of rainfall erosion. Such erosion could only mean that the Sphinx was carved during or before the last rains that marked the transition of northern Africa from the last ice age to the present epoch, a transition that occurred in the millennia from around 10,000 to 5,000 BC. He also hosted my personal favorite, a series of DVDs, a 7-hour documentary called Magical Egypt, something that changed my life personally. He won an Emmy for his 1993 special, Mystery of the Sphinx, on NBC, hosted by Charlton Heston, something I've watched probably 50 times, and I'm not exaggerating. He can be found all over YouTube and the internet, constantly stirring up trouble. I would like to welcome John Anthony West from New York. John, are you with us?
Thank you. I am with you, and I'm not in shorts. No, it's a blizzard blowing here.
Exactly. You're
single digit degrees, but it's inside, so I don't care.
Well, welcome, my friend, and we've been looking forward to this all week, the both of us, and just for everybody out there, as we get this cranking, where you're in the Hudson Valley, where exactly?
Yes,
where exactly?
Hudson Valley, north of Kingston, which is about 120 miles north of New York City. I'm personally at the very edge of the Catskills. The eastern edge of the Catskills rise in my backyard. They are my backyard.
Now, I wish everybody could see. They're going to see when we do the podcast, but if they could see right. your home looks like Indiana Jones, and that is really, really cool. How many miles, again, I just want to paint a picture for everybody. How many miles is your closest neighbor?
Well, actually, it depends which direction you go. If you go, the house is on a little country road, so the next neighbor is a few hundred yards away. But if you walked due west from my house over the mountains, it would be 25 miles before you hit another house, which you don't think of in New York. You think in Montana or Wyoming, right, somewhere you can go 25 miles and not hit another house. No, but instead you'll go, you'll run across a biochemical weapons factory or something like that.
Well, I have gone over the Hudson River up there, right, on a bridge, and my memory of that is nothing but rolling hills of trees. It is absolutely majestic.
Yeah, actually, I'll tell you something, Tim. It didn't come up in our preliminary conversations. When I moved back from Europe, I was there for over 20 years, in 1978, and a friend of mine, I was living many of those years in the little island of Ibiza, the hippie haven, but I was there before the hippies. I'm older than that. Back in the late 50s, early 60s. And I finally moved back to America, again, for complicated reasons. And I had a friend who had been to Ibiza, who I knew from Ibiza, and he lived in Woodstock now. And he said, well, you should come take a look up here if you're looking for a place to live. It's sort of like Ibiza without the Mediterranean. So I did. And yeah, it looked very interesting. But I was listening to NPR to the radio, and they had a guy talking about the old days. And he came up with an interesting statistic that this was 1980. And he said, he was talking about the amount of the region, the whole Northeast, that was forested 100 years ago, and the amount that was forested now. So here's a test. How much of the Hudson Valley, you're a bit familiar with it, do you think was forested in 1880, and how much do you think was forested in 1980?
So I guess that what you're going to tell me is there was nothing, and now it's covered in trees.
Something like that.
Yeah, wow.
It was 15% trees back 100 years ago, and now it's 85% trees.
Yeah, because it's just a thick forest up there.
Well, it was and it was all hard scrapple farming, and agribusiness, agri-farming put it out of business. Effectively, there were no farms left, so everything reverted to forest. The Indians could live here again if they weren't too so busy with their casinos.
Well, this is good because I promise everybody that listens to this show that we're just going to have a conversation. You know, like we're sitting on the front porch somewhere drinking some sweet tea, and we're just going to rap. And if it's interesting to me or you, it's going to be interesting to everybody else. And
it isn't too bad for them.
Well, yeah, and we've got 3 hours tonight, and we've got a lot of stuff that we're going to pack in, and some of the things that we're going to get this started now, but some of the things I do want to, for everybody out there, we're going to talk about Gobekli Tepe. If they don't know what that is, at the end of the show they will. We're going to talk a little bit about Puma Punku, obviously the Sphinx and your work with Robert Schock. I want to talk about your tours that you do over in Egypt and everything else. So we've got a lot of stuff, and you and I were talking all week and for hours. And so for everybody out there, John and I talked all week long. We're like, hey, we need to, we talked about so many things, and we want everything that we talked about all week for hours now. We wanted to make sure we got into the show. So I hope that our memory can go back and pick up some of the stuff that we had talked about earlier this week. And we'll try to get to all of that. 3 hours seems like a lot of time, but we've got a lot of stuff to cover, and it's all great stuff. So let's get moving.
Okay.
Rogue Egyptology. Now, I've heard you talk about this a lot, and I'm not sure if you consider yourself an Egyptologist. What is the difference, and what do you consider yourself? And the reason why I ask, and it doesn't have to be a long explanation, but the reason why I ask is, what is an actual Egyptologist? And okay, and what do you consider yourself besides troublemaker?
Well, that's where the rogue Egyptologist comes in. Technically, an Egyptologist, formally a credentialed Egyptologist, has been through at least a master's degree, mostly a PhD in Egyptology. He's studied certain things. He certainly knows up to a certain extent the hieroglyphs. So when these guys, however, their view of Egypt is diametrically opposed to my own, and my own isn't invented by myself, but by the amazing French Orientalist philosopher, mathematician with the unpronounceable name R.A. Schwaller-Dulubich, which the Orthodox Egyptologists deny. But when they come up to me, which they sometimes do, and say, well, what are your credentials? And my stock answer is, well, I don't have any, and that's why I know something, which doesn't make me many friends. But
do you find it hard with the Orthodox Egyptologists, and there's a mouthful, not only around the world, but the foundation in Giza and what goes on officially over there, to change minds? They just don't want to hear it, do they? They just don't.
Actually, nobody wants to change their mind. And it doesn't matter, even in the arts. Every new development in the arts had to fight whatever the entrenched establishment was. It's like that. That's human nature. Nobody likes to change their mind, including me, as a matter of fact.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you're literally constantly rolling that rock uphill, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, that comes with the territory, and I don't mind it. I understand that it has to happen that way. It's regrettable because, in theory, it's a science. It isn't really a science, but let's say it's scholarship, And the evidence should be the determining factor, not anybody's preconceptions. When you come up with the evidence, and we'll get into this at some point or another, with the Sphinx and the water weathering, this is obvious. It shouldn't be necessary to still be fighting this battle. I mean, it's as clear as the roundness of the earth. But we are, and we're obliged to fight this battle, and so we fight it. It's always like that. And to a certain extent, I don't even mind. I mean, sometimes I think that having these guys on my side would be an embarrassment. It would be like being invited to dinner by Dick Cheney or something.
Well, no, and I totally understand that, but you touch on a couple of points that are very important. In your Magical Egypt series, there are some scenes there where you're walking through the museum there in Cairo.
Yes.
And you're looking at specific things that, to me, and I'm talking about the pots and the jars, and
Oh, right, yeah.
and the material that they're made from, thousands and thousands of years old, but they are perfect.
Yep.
Impossible to make today. Forget about,
Right.
just absolutely impossible. But yet, when you look at stuff like this, to me, they have their own evidence right there in glass cabinets that they're showing to the world, but they're in a constant state of denial, and I don't get it.
It's not that difficult. It's difficult to excuse, but it's not difficult to understand. As I said, nobody likes to change their mind, especially men. Not that bad about such things.
Right.
They don't have the same arrogance in their intellect, in their ideas, as it were. Anyway, but to use an example, and I often do this when on my trips, for example, there are certain places where we go, and I say, well, here's the evidence. And then people say, as you just said, how can they deny this? And I come back with an example that if you're looking for something, let's say you're in South Africa and you're walking through, you're out looking for potatoes, and you walk across the diamond fields of Johannesburg, and you come back and you say to your wife, no goddamn potatoes, just a bunch of nasty glittering stones. If they're not looking for it, they don't see it. The criminal
right. I understand. Yes.
The criminal part comes in when you point it out to them, and they still don't see it.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about the Sphinx then. That's a good point, because not only, yes, you won an Emmy for the Mystery of the Sphinx, and that was great, but you would think that something that was so visible in the media, and I'm talking about the special, it's an award-winning presentation. Charlton Heston did a great job. And I still watch it all the time, and I'm still just amazed by how it was silenced. In that but Robert Schoch is somebody now. Okay, you say that you're not credentialed, you're not an official Egyptologist, but Robert Schoch is not only credentialed, but he's a professor, he's a teacher. It's Boston University. He's got a grip on everything. And when he speaks about the Sphinx, I just think that it's something that you can't ignore, but yet they choose to ignore it. And in Robert's defense, he's not scared to say something isn't something as well. I mean, there's a lot of claims about a lot of different things out there when it comes to ancient lost civilizations and claims and theories. And he'll step up and shoot somebody down, too, as well. It's not like he is completely biased on one side of the fence. But when it comes to the Sphinx, this is a geologist. This is a guy that knows what he is talking about. And when it comes to the Sphinx, and he's presenting this erosion, and he explains it very clearly, and to somebody like me who my education comes from a whole other, but I understand what he's saying. But yet they deny Schoch. And how can you explain that? I can't.
Well, as I said, it's I can explain it. There's an anecdote that I read in the Reader's Digest when I was a kid, maybe 12 or 13 years old. It's supposed to be a true story. And it concerns Jascha Heifetz, the great violinist, when he was giving his Carnegie Hall debut at the age of 11. In the audience were the then reigning violin virtuoso, Misha Elman, and the great pianist, Artur Rubinstein. And about halfway through the concert, Elman turned to Rubinstein and said, "Hot in here, isn't it?"
Yeah, right.
And Rubinstein said, "Not for pianists." So it's like that. The water weathering of the Sphinx and its implications, which mean a total rewrite of all of ancient history, cuts the ground, pulls the rug out from under all of these guys' PhDs. All of their beliefs, everything that they've been taught to believe and have never questioned, suddenly turns out to be dead wrong, and they don't like it.
Well, okay, so explain to me, just like I'm 4 years old, answer a few questions for me. How old is the Sphinx in text? No. In textbooks today, how old is the Sphinx?
Textbooks. It's carved by the pharaoh Khephren in Greek, Khafra in ancient Egyptian, who is the successor of Khufu or Cheops, who's supposedly responsible for the Great Pyramid, which puts it back around 2450 BC. And this is the received wisdom, as it were, or the general accepted explanation. And it's much more complicated. I mean, even with our 3 hours, we can't get into that in great depth. So when we go to Egypt on my trips, for example, we spend a whole morning on the Giza Plateau. Actually, it's a whole day on the Giza Plateau, going through the evidence piece by piece by piece by piece. And it's actually irrefutable. And I'll tell you a funny story.
But I'm just trying to, because we're going to spend a lot of time on the Sphinx here. So for everybody listening, they just need to, because of your theory and Robert Schoch and the evidence that you presented, the Sphinx is technically, by definition, 4,500 years old, or approximately 4,500 years old. Right, and built around the time of the Great Pyramid, which is also dated about the same time, approximately. Okay, now your theory, you and Robert Schoch have presented that the Sphinx has water erosion evidence on it, which the last time that it rained significantly on the Giza Plateau to cause that type of erosion, that erosion had to happen on those rocks approximately how long ago?
Well, that's up for grabs to a certain extent. The Sahara was turned into a desert around 10,000, 11,000 BC, coeval with the meltdown of the last ice age.
Okay, stop right there. Okay, hold on. Stop right there. So now we have a theoretical gap between Orthodox archaeology and Egyptologists of about 5,000 years. Is that what we're talking about here?
But in between, there are a couple of semi-rainy periods called the Noptian pluvials.
But that couldn't have caused the erosion?
No, well, this is part of the point. Let me just backtrack a little bit.
But hold on. Well, I'm going to allow you to backtrack. But for everybody out there, the significance of what we're talking about here is possibly an additional 2,500, 3,500, 5,000 aged years, that the Sphinx is older than what everybody...
It's actually even much more than that, Jimmy. Let me just backtrack a bit.
But it's an extraordinary thing that I can't even wrap my mind around, because it's 5,000 years.
No, it's maybe a lot more than that. But see, the implications are the important thing. The Sphinx is almost unquestionably the most spectacular sculpture on Earth.
No doubt.
Almost no doubt. Now, not only the Sphinx itself, but the temples that are adjacent to it are not that spectacular by Egyptian standards in terms of size, but they're spectacular in terms of technology because they're made of huge blocks of stone weighing somewhere between 75 and over 100, 75 tons and over 100 tons, even up to 200. And they're jointed into place like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. Now, if the Sphinx is pushed back to 10,000 BC or even older, actually a precessional cycle older, I'll get into this, 36,000 BC maybe, and Schrock is gradually getting to accept this even older date. It means that a civilization capable of producing the most spectacular sculpture on Earth was also in possession of a technology that would produce buildings that we couldn't produce today. You know, you've seen The Mystery of the Sphinx a bunch of times.
Yes.
We have Jesse Warren, the project director of this cogeneration plant, where they've got a big crane that can handle a 200-ton boiler. And he's saying he doesn't see how you could rig a block with that crane in order to get these things into position to build these temples. So now you're confronted by something that absolutely disavows everything that anybody has ever learned about ancient civilization.
Right.
And this is a mind blower. And you see, when I got into this, I was working on, maybe we'll get into this, maybe we won't, with Schroller de Lubitsch. I've been commissioned to write a book on Schroller de Lubitsch's symbolist vision of Egypt, or interpretation of Egypt, which sees a great sacred science, a science of cosmic principles, where the academics, I call them the quackademics, see only a kind of remarkably ingenious primitive geniuses at work producing all of these unbelievable temples and pyramids and all the rest of it. And Schroller's writing in one of his ancillary books called, they now translated into English, it wasn't translated when I was working on it, The King of the Pharaonic Theocracy, translated as Sacred Science. And he's talking about the Egyptian belief attested in several chronological tablet called the Palermo stone, because it's in Palermo.
Right.
A chronological papyrus called the Turin papyrus, because it's housed in the museum in Turin in Italy, where the Egyptians talk about the beginnings of their civilization. And when you put the dates, because they have the regnal dates of when Egypt was ruled by the gods themselves or the cosmic principles, and when it's ruled by the Shemsuhar, the followers or companions of Horus, and you put the dates together, you get something like 34,000 or 36,000 years old.
Right. And
right.
And when you start to look at those kind of dates, that's when you just start to go, whoa.
That's right.
It's now we're way behind the Ice Age and everything else.
Right.
Where any archaeologist is going to tell you, no, that's absolutely impossible, and they'll stop you in your tracks. They just don't want to hear it.
That's what they did. That's what they did do, and this is where they're going to get it stuffed right down their throats very soon. But anyhow, so Schroller in this book, Sacred Science, is writing a kind of a scholarly, he's discussing the ancient Egyptian belief that the civilization was much, much older, and using the texts of the Greco-Roman writers around the time of Jesus and Caesar and so on. And it's an interesting document because he pulls together all of these sources, and then almost as a throwaway line at the very end, he says, and of course the Great Sphinx of Giza has been weathered by water and not by wind and sand. And when I read that, I mean, it was a revelation, because I said all the rest of it is a scholarly argument. Was
it relief?
It was very well put together, but it's not science.
Right.
If it's weathered by water, it should be. So, I mean, you should be able to prove it or disprove it one way or another. So this started. So I took a year out of my life to research. I'm not a geologist, but I did my research and put together the theory that why the Sphinx had been weathered by water and why it couldn't be the usual explanation and therefore not the same dating, blah, blah, blah. nobody paid any attention to it. I had a friend who had been an English teacher, actually, at the American University of Cairo in the middle 80s, and he read my book, Serpent in the Sky, and I think the guidebook, I'm not sure. But anyway, we got friendly, and he was teaching at Boston University, and at a certain point said, I think the symbolist interpretation of Egypt is actually very important for humanity, not just a scholarly quibble. It really is, if you understand what's involved. And I agree. That was my point of doing it in the first place. And he said, well, what would you, is there anything that I can do in my position my academic position as a professor? Is there anything I can do to help? And instantly I said, yeah. And I laughed. I said, find me an open-minded geologist to look into the water weathering of the Sphinx. And he said, well, why are you laughing? I said, well, my experience tells me that finding an open-minded scientist is like finding a fundamentalist Christian who loves his enemies.
Exactly.
And he said, whoa, wait a minute. He said, there's a young guy teaches with me at my school at BU. And he's young, but he's had a number of books already published. He's fully credentialed, PhD, Yale, blah, blah, blah. He might be interested. Anyway, one thing led to another. It's a long story. One thing led to another, and finally, I got to meet Jacques. Initially, he didn't even want to meet me until he was up for tenure. And
of course.
Well, if people think you're looking for a lost civilization,
right?
Quotes,
right.
Atlantis,
No, get tenure out of the way. Yeah, right. Get tenure out of the way first, and he can do what he wants.
Right. So finally, he was up for tenure, and he said, "Okay, let's meet." So we had this meeting, and one thing led to another, and it's a long story, which Jacques and I are about to write in great detail in a book that we're doing together on the whole Sphinx theory, because now, as you know from our discussions, now we have the smoking gun and maybe a couple of smoking guns. We were saying before about the evidence, and if you watch The Mystery of the Sphinx and you see after we presented this at the Geological Society of America's annual meeting back in 91, this was a big deal. I mean, it was all over the press. The science press was there. The Egyptologists and the archaeologists were screaming and shouting, and the geologists were 100% on my side. I mean, sometimes they were saying, how could anybody have missed that? Well,
no, and it was a big deal back then, and they were paying attention to you.
Oh, yeah.
And the smoking guns. I want to keep the smoking guns until the next segment, and so we'll get to that in a second. But when you first talked to Jacques, was he as open-minded as you hoped, or was he like, no, you know what, you've got to come at me with something better than this?
He was very, very good, but super cautious. I mean, and so he should be. Super cautious, and he absolutely insisted that he could not possibly, back it up unless he got there. And so
hold on, John. Did you? I can only imagine the look on his face when, just like any other archaeologist or geologist or any other educated PhD type of guy in this field, you're going to go and hit him with these facts. Now, at the time, were you guessing maybe 10,000 BC? Were you guessing Ice Age? And is this what you actually said to him with a straight face? I mean, how does somebody like that react?
No, I had tons. I had loads of pictures. I had the evidence is the evidence. And actually, I wasn't even talking 10,000 BC. That was later. Really, I was talking about the Egyptian texts themselves, which they talk about, they don't give a date, but when you put it all together, you get 36,000 BC, which is a precessional cycle prior to 10,000 BC.
That's right.
And Jacques, he was unknown to me. Our mutual friend, he said to our mutual friend, he didn't want me to know who he was, because his name actually, because actually, and actually my own friend said, when I said, let me talk to Jacques, or let me talk to this guy, I didn't know who he was.
Right.
He said, no, let me do it. You're too inflammatory. So anyway, when we finally met, when he was finally up for tenure, he organized a lecture for me at Boston University for students and interested professors. And then, so I met this big, tall guy with his long, shaggy hair, and we got on very well. I mean, Schock was being very, very cautious, but interested in the evidence. And at a certain point, I don't know if this is relative to this conversation or not, but it will be relevant somewhere soon, because Schock is geologist, geophysicist, paleontologist. Those are his fields. Mm-hmm. And suddenly we got into the whole thing of Darwinian evolution, which is a particular hobby horse of mine. And do you know what was his name? Like Senior Moments. Gould, Stephen Jay Gould.
Oh, yes.
And anyway, so we got talking cautiously about Darwinian evolution. And I said, what do you think of Stephen Jay Gould? And Schock instantly said, oh, he's a bozo. And I said, then I knew I had a colleague.
I thought you were going to bring up Richard Dawkins. That's where I thought you were going.
Oh, that's later. But
yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's let that go for now. Anyway, I would love to have Richard on this show. It would be ugly, but.
Oh, no, get him on with me. No, but actually, Schock and I, the first book we have to write now is about the whole Sphinx theory, which is going to be fun and it'll be quick because everything I do takes ages. But this one will be quick because a lot of the material is already there. But after that, we have in mind the definitive anti-Darwin book, Schock and myself. And when we get that one in the works, though, I'd love to get in touch with Dawkins and Dennett.
Absolutely. We could have a three-way, and it would be an amazing show. And, although Dawkins is...
It'll be a bloodbath.
Yes, and he I'm going to keep this clean. This is a family show. I'm going to keep this clean. But he is somebody that he tries to be intimidating, and I understand that with his accent and the way that he speaks, and he's really good at that. He's built a nice business. He's got his following, and I get all of that, and I watch all that I can, and he freaks me out a lot, and I love it. It's great entertainment. But him and it would and you, it would just I would go. I would go. It would be go time.
Well, we'll see. That's all. That's a couple of years into the future.
Anyway, so back to the Sphinx.
Back to the Sphinx.
So
I got Schock on board.
Right.
Finally, we got we scratched together a bit of money and we went over there, and it was really funny because Schock, he's a geologist and he moves about as quickly as geological ages and everything. He had his nose. He was looking. It was impossible. He was there for 2 weeks maybe. It was impossible to get a declarative sentence out of him.
But was that his first time there too, as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it was obvious that he was interested, but he wasn't going to commit on, until he really thought it through. And then at a certain point, he said, "Yeah, well, this has to be right." And we put together an abstract for the annual meeting of the Geological Society of America, 1991. And we spent a whole day. Schock lives in Boston, and he came to visit me. And I'd never written an abstract. So, I've written a lot of things, but I've never written an abstract.
For some very smart people, by the way.
He explained to me what the abstract had to be. And so we spent a whole afternoon writing 2 paragraphs, making this really epical theory sound as boring as possible.
Right.
So that they'd accept it. And then, so they did accept it, but then the GSA, they understood that this was groundbreaking. This was paradigm busting and so on.
Yes.
So they called a press conference. And that's how, we were the hit of this show. Thousands, hundreds of geologists came by our presentation, and Schock was there to explain it to them. And so, a couple of times, and Schock was really concerned because, you can make one stupid mistake and, all of a sudden you look like a real dope. And I have nothing to lose. I'm not a geologist. I'm not a scientist. I don't give a damn.
Right.
But Schock has a lot to lose.
Right.
He has a whole reputation to lose.
Well, at that time, he's a rock star. He's a rock star today, but his career was just starting.
Oh
then.
yeah, we had a lot of fun with this stuff. There was one point actually where he was really concerned because he was used to being, treated with respect by his own colleagues, and suddenly he had all of these people attacking him, and he was really concerned that at a certain point, I wrote him a really powerful letter that says, Chuck, if you're not in this, it's doomed, and you know that this theory is correct. So are you in or aren't you? And he wrote back.
Well, and you have to ask that question. Yes, absolutely.
I said, yeah, you're right. Okay, let's do it. And so, everything changed for him too. We laugh about this now that now he's a superstar. Had he backed out, he wouldn't be. But without him, I'd also be in the back. Nobody would have heard of this. They wouldn't have paid any attention to me. Anyway, here's a funny bit of the story, because we're at the GSA, and really this is big news. It's front page headlines all over the place. Science press, regular press, New York Times, all over the place. We get interviewed over the telephone by the science reporter from the Boston Globe. Schock's in Boston, so there's going to be a good article and stuff. And so Schock is his usual gentlemanly self in his interview. And then the science reporter, what was his name? Something Talbot, I forget, interviews me. And he said, well, the Egyptologists and the archaeologists are up in arms. They're calling you all of these names. They're taking all of this abuse. And he said, well, how do you explain this? Why? And I said, look, it doesn't matter. This is a geological argument. It's about the weathering patterns on rocks. And when it comes to the weathering patterns on rocks, an Egyptologist and an archaeologist's opinion is no more valid than a proctologist's. And we printed this. And apparently this created a huge uproar in the archaeology department of Boston University. And there was a woman there whose name I won't use here, but I will when we write our book, who wrote this really scandalous character assassination of Schock. In the in-house Boston paper, magazine, whatever it is, journal. And I said, Schock, you have to respond to this. And he said, no, let it go. And I said, well, do you mind if I respond to it? So he said, no, well, you go ahead. So I wrote this woman a letter, and I said, I understand that this reference saying that the proctologist really upset you, but you should know, just for your own satisfaction, that the proctologists didn't like it either. They said their job was to cure sick assholes. They didn't like being compared to them. So this had the effect that this woman sent my letter to the whole Egyptological and archaeological community. It's Brer Rabbit in the briar patch. I couldn't have asked for a better result.
Well, a text just came in about what you're talking about right now, and there isn't a name attached to it, but it would have meant if everything, the presentation of the GSA and everybody sitting out there, that suddenly wouldn't everybody have to go back and get another PhD? You know what I mean?
No, well,
if they accepted it, and what happened after the GSA? So the convention is over, and you guys are done, and you walk away. Was it forgotten about, or
it's been going on? It's been going on strong for the last 20 years.
Well, the GSA gets together every single year. So did they follow up with this at other conventions?
No,
did they invite you back? Okay.
No, they don't do that. We followed up because we collected more evidence.
Right.
And we gave another presentation in 2000 at Reno. But this one, for some peculiar reason, there were very, very little science press there. Well, we had tons more information. And we had a packed house of geologists in the audience, which were entirely supportive, except for two or three guys, who were arguing. And the nature of it wasn't. We learned from that. It was a a 20-minute presentation. You can't get much accomplished in 20 minutes. And then like 2 minutes for question and answer. You can't do anything with that. The poster presentation was much better. So it didn't, we couldn't really respond in kind, but basically the geologists were 100% or 99.9% on, again, understanding that this was water weathering. And then you would just have to accept, Scott, from a scholarly scientific point of view, you would have to accept the consequences, that everything had to be rethought. And because they're geologists, it's sort of like the Yasha Heifetz story. You know, to a geologist, they don't care if you have to rewrite history.
No, exactly. But that brings up a point. Were there Egyptologists at that GSA, or was it just all geologists that were there?
Mostly it's geologists, but some of them have a stake in Egyptology, and so a couple of those guys were making noise. But anyway,
well, but I don't want to cut you off. But this is the thing: is geologists, those guys are black and white guys, and you are presenting this evidence, and they're open. They're like, okay, yeah, we get it, we understand.
That's right.
So now, and this is 1991, 1992, right? And but over in Egypt, and I specifically talk about Egypt, how did they react with this? Because this is epic is the wrong word; it's overused. But this is history changing stuff.
Oh, it is.
And how did they come back at you? Because obviously your television special is upcoming, so people are noticing the mainstream media is involved. But how did Egypt react, and the Orthodox Egyptologist out there?
Well, Zahi Hawass was, who was then the reigning king, and was my bitter enemy for many years. But now we've buried the hatchet, and we're actually quite friendly on a personal level. But he still doesn't buy the theory. But we're working on Zahi. But no, they of course were furious, and since they own the show, I mean, their playing field. So It's hard to get a word in edgewise, but public opinion also counts. I mean, this show, mind you, Mystery of the Sphinx, I tried calculating it, but roughly speaking, it went around the world. It kept getting played over and over. Probably at least 200 million people have seen this show.
Exactly.
Maybe more. And it's still alive. People are getting in touch with me all the time, having seen the show that's now on Netflix, and so people keep on seeing it. So as I said, my part in this was, one, recognizing Schwaller's observation as a game changer, and two, going to the trouble to research it, publicize it, get Shock on board. So this is where we stand. So this has been going on for 20 some odd years. Following the GSA presentation, we had what was supposed to be a debate, which was really stupid, but it's part of the video. And by the way, I should say, anybody interested, if you haven't seen the video, you can buy it from me if you want it, because I have it in DVD, and you should buy it to support.
Yes, the links are there on the website.
The links are there, but you can also get it on Netflix. It's on Netflix, so you can Google up Mystery of the Sphinx and see it for yourself, because we can only do so much, even in our 3 hours. And the Netflix, the show is whatever it is, 90 minutes or something like that.
Right.
So you can see it all for yourself. Anyway, we were then invited to debate the thing with the Egyptologists, specifically Mark Lehner, and the geologist who was working with him at the time, a guy called Kailal Gowrie, who's a conservation specialist, not a stratigrapher, and the sort of guy who is capable of judging the nature of our particular kind of evidence for the AAAS, that's the American Association for the Advancement of Science.
Right.
In, I think, February of next year, 92. And so this is 20 minutes. I mean, you can't accomplish anything in a complex, scholarly scientific issue like this in 20 minutes. But Mark Lehner came out with this great line, show me a pot chart. Where is the evidence? Show me a pot chart. Unfortunately, they wouldn't let me, because I don't have the right letters after my name, be part of the debating team. It was Shock and our geophysicist, Tom DeBecke. this was too bad because I'm pretty quick on my feet when it comes to the words. So, if challenged with where's a pot jar, I would have said to Mark Lane, well, this is a very advanced civilization. They had paper cups, so you couldn't expect to find pot shards. But basically, that was his argument. It can't be so because this is a primitive society. They're hunter-gatherers. How could it be this old?
Right.
Show me a pot.
But the thing is,
now or later.
Well, exactly. But no, that is a whole nother discussion. But what must have been frustrating for you is being around all of these academics, and you're the guy without the letters after your name. So really, they don't even want to talk to you, and you're forced to sitting on your hands, and they just literally, their noses are turned up because you don't have those letters after. You can present all the evidence that you have, right, but they don't want to talk to you.
No, listen.
It just must have been crazy for you. That's all.
No, it isn't. No, because I don't expect anything from them. I mean, I do not expect either their intelligence or their integrity. So when they behave the way they do, I'm not surprised.
You're kind of like me in that regard. Yeah, I can respect that.
I have experience with them. See, I
Right.
I started out, we haven't got into this. I didn't start out as a scholar. I'm a scholar by default. I'm a novelist and playwright and screenwriter, and I knew that I was born at the age of 13, when I was bar mitzvahed, I knew I'd been born into a lunatic asylum. By the time I was 19, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the little child who says the emperor has no clothes. And gradually, I started doing that. I mean, I wrote, I had a lot of stuff published, and none of it ever made any money, which is probably a good thing because I never would have taken on all of this scholarship if I'd been financially successful as a novelist, playwright, screenwriter, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, when I finally, through an interest first in astrology, oddly enough, which led me to an interest in the Gurdjieff work, the Gurdjieff school. Well, from this, I learned my first book was called The Case for Astrology, which is exactly what it says. It is a case for astrology.
Right.
And from the reactions to that, I learned what the reaction was going to be, how I was going to have to deal with quackademia. And from my participating in the Gurdjieff work, I learned that if I let these people get at me, my quote, it's my own sort of version of a Gurdjieff teaching, is that whoever and whatever presses your buttons is your master. So if I allow myself, or anybody allows themselves to have their buttons pressed, they lose. Doesn't even matter if they're right. You read all of this garbage that goes on now, this politically correct crap of people being offended. My whole objective is to offend everyone if I possibly can, because that's a good spiritual lesson for them.
Well, and there's also
I own them.
Well, and there's also the religious aspect of all of this too, as well. And I've got a bunch of questions that have been coming in. This is a good spot. We're at the top of the hour. Let's take a little break here, because when we come back, and we've got, I don't care. We don't have to. We don't have to. Yeah, this is my show. We don't have to run commercials if I don't want to. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a break here, and refill your glass, and we'll be back right after this. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. We're on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
How long is this at?
It's going to be about 2 minutes.
Okay.
We'll be back. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Don't touch that mouse. John Anthony West. When we come back, stay with us.
You're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
My name is Nick Dominguez. Hi, I'm Rex Dominguez, and I listen to jimmychurchradio.com. Jimmy, your preacher. Amen. This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to jimmychurchradio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
This is Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
Yes.
We are of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
KJCR.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will. On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back. JimmyChurchRadio.com. I am your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. We are live around the world right now on the Dark Matter Radio Network. And keep your questions coming. We've got a bunch of stuff lined up. Go ahead. You can post on Facebook. The producers are over there checking out. Rita and Hilton are working. And so Facebook, and keep your tweets coming, as well as email Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. You can also do that directly on the website if you just want to post directly and comment directly. We are live in the studio from New York. We have John Anthony West. And, okay, let me set up a couple of things really quick before we move on. And I see that John is now settled back in front of the camera. But John and Robert Schock have a theory, and one that I am firmly standing behind, and have for a long time now, that the Sphinx is indeed quite a bit older than it is, and reaches back possibly to the Ice Age, maybe even before that. And it's gone against the grain of everything that we know. Now, I'm going to set up right now a bunch of, because we've got a couple of smoking guns that have surfaced in the last, officially now, we're in 2014, John, by the way. So now we're looking at 9 years now has passed for Göbekli Tepe, which we're going to get into now. So, but back when the Ice Age, or let's go to 10,000 BC. Let's just, instead of 12,000, 13, 10, 9, let's just pick out a round number. Let's just stay with 10,000 BC. 10,000 BC, man was running around with clubs, hunter-gatherers, no organized anything, no cities, no towns, no nothing, couple of groups, maybe 4, 5, 10, whatever, tribes, but no farming, no knowledge of seeds or wheat or anything like that. There wasn't anything there. Supposedly, man was still an idiot. Okay, let's just call it as it should be. Because if that was the case, then there was no construction of anything anywhere, period. And there wasn't any evidence to support your theory until, I think, Göbekli Tepe. Now, for everybody out there, Göbekli Tepe, it's in Turkey. And we're going to discuss it ad nauseum right now, was discovered in 1995, I believe. Look, I have no notes in front of me, so we're just going off of my tiny brain, John, so you can jump in at any time if I make a mistake and correct me. But I believe 1995. But Göbekli Tepe has officially, and this is what I love, this is the part that I'm just like, aha, okay, take that. Has been officially carbon dated to be somewhere around 10,000 to 12,000, maybe even older, years old. Right. On an official position from everybody. Yep. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, now
that's the pot shot.
Yeah, totally. It's a shot across the bow is what that is. But now, so with Göbekli Tepe, and again, we're going to discuss this, but I want everybody to understand what Göbekli Tepe is and the implications of it. Göbekli Tepe is not a little fire pit that was discovered with a couple of skulls and a couple of chicken bones. Oh, no. That's not what Göbekli Tepe is. Göbekli Tepe had to have been built, and this is what, my opinion, too, comes into play here, but thousands and thousands of organized people had to have been involved in the making of this, because it is now, I think they're up to what, 25 circles have been officially, found, right?
Well, something like that, detected by
Did-
ground penetrating radar.
Right. 4 of them have been
5 have
excavated, right? 4
partially excavated.
and you've been there, so I'm going to I want your personal opinions. But it occupies a hilltop, and it's large, and not only is it big, it's beautiful. We're talking about carved columns, intricate things. We're going to get into those details too. But for that to have been built, and the fact that it was deliberately buried, and we'll get to my theory on that in a second.
Yeah.
But that means there was organized man 10, 12,000 years ago, when history and Orthodox tells us that never existed. And that's why this is not only a smoking gun, but truly history has officially been rewritten. The implications are monumental.
Yep, it's not a smoking gun; it's an arsenal.
Yes, it is completely nuclear.
It really
nuclear.
is. And the whole, actually, it was as a very ancient site. It was known about earlier. It was known about in the 50s, but because of like arrowheads and flints and stuff like that, which takes it back tens of thousands of years, but nothing. And then in 93 or 94, whatever date that was, the guy who owns the hill,
he was a farmer,
and he was plowing.
Yep.
And he hit what he thought was a boulder, and he went back with his plow and he hit it again. It wouldn't come up.
Didn't he try to? He actually tried to chisel it out, didn't he? He like destroyed.
Yeah, he tried to. He tried with his plow to get it, and then he realized when he dug around a little bit that it was the top of a column. So then he made a terrible mistake for himself. He called in the archaeologist.
Right.
They stole his hill away from him. And he's fighting a battle ever since because they stole his hill. They really did. But anyway, they started digging, and they brought in, however it worked out, I'm not sure, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who's a very nice guy, an absolutely orthodox archaeologist with impeccable credentials. And they started excavating, and once they got into it, they realized, and they got the ground penetrating radar there, and they realized that they had 22 or 25, whatever the number is, closely adjacent stone circles, like mini Stonehenges, and not so many.
They're huge. No, don't downplay that. They are huge in scale.
Well, they're not Stonehenge. They're not 40-ton blocks.
I know, right?
Well,
but each circle, how many feet across? Now, I've seen all the video and photographs and stuff. But is it 50 feet across? Maybe
around something like 50. But the way they're constructed, it's really complicated because they've got an interior that's really a true stone circle a la Stonehenge with 2 massive 10 to 15 ton pillars surrounded by a circle of smaller pillars, and those are enclosed in sort of rough stone walls. It looks like there's a number of stages of construction.
But at that time, he didn't understand the age of anything. He knew,
he understood pretty quickly because he realized that they'd been buried deliberately.
Well, that's a whole exactly. That's like the best part.
Knows they were buried completely. That's why nothing was ever found.
So as they're digging down and they're finding these layers of garbage and rocks, right?
Yeah.
And they
garbage they can date.
Right. They can date this. You can't date rock, but you can date.
Can.
Well,
you can with isotopic analysis, but that's a different
thing. But they had garbage, and so they start to
organic matter, which they could carbon date, and they found that the thing was filled in, deliberately covered over this huge area. It must be, I don't know how many acres, but a lot of acres of 22, 25 of these stone circles deliberately covered over. No one knows why. We have certain theories, Shock and I, but we don't know either. Nobody knows.
Well, this is my theory. Well, actually, if you think about 2001: A Space Odyssey, okay, and the monolith on the moon, And
Right.
when and the way that Clark and Kubrick did this in the movie, because it was like an ice pick in the forehead. It was so stunning
Yeah.
when they said, "Oh, it was deliberately buried 5 million years ago." And you're like, what? And everybody's looking at it. Well, it's the same thing with this. It was deliberately buried 10,000, 12,000 years ago. And the implications of that are just so mind bending. It
Yep.
changes everything.
Yes, it does.
Everything that you knew was wrong. Everything you've been taught is wrong. And now we have to go back. And then not only is it a smoking gun, because researchers like yourself and Shock and going back to the Sphinx and everything else, it allows you guys to go, hey, check this out. There was organization back then. You can't deny it now. I mean, and how does that?
Right.
It is that significant. And for everybody out there listening right now that doesn't know about Göbekli Tepe, and I wish that Göbekli Tepe was a little more. What's the word I want to use? Publicized.
It's pretty publicized.
Well, in our circles.
No, more than our circles. It was the headline article in the National Geographic, May or June last year, 2012. But
this is where I'll debate you on that, John. And this is where I'll debate you. You walk down the street and you go down to Times Square and go up and ask anybody about the pyramids, or you can ask anybody if they know what those are, but ask anybody about Göbekli Tepe, and they're going to look at you, but they don't know what you're talking about. And that's my point.
No, it hasn't.
It's possibly the most significant discovery in the history of man. I can get that bold and say it because it's that changing.
Close.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah.
Anyway, in the history of history, this is true.
Yeah.
But you're right. But it has got a lot of press. But the press that it's got carefully skirts the significance of a major construction, massive construction, artistic construction of 15-ton pillars intricately carved at 10,000 or earlier BC. So it gives the dates without actually emphasizing the implications, which is what you're
and the
talking
significance
about.
of it all. That's right. And
it should have been headlines. It should have even made bigger headlines than Tiger Woods' mistresses.
Or the discovery of King Tut's tomb,
King Tut's tomb was a pretty big deal.
It was then, but that's how big Göbekli Tepe is. And I don't want to downplay.
Philosophically and scientifically, it's much more important than King Tut's tomb.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. For me, not only are we lucky that they buried it like they did, because the preservation of it's just like it was when it was originally built. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
The second,
is amazing. Right.
it for as old as it is, when man supposedly didn't even know, he's wearing animal skins, all right, but supposedly Orthodox, but they are some of the most beautiful carvings. And just intricate and beautiful, and the state of preservation, it's all there. And it's just a mind-blowing thing. You need to go and look at pictures of Göbekli Tepe. Now, I will get some stuff up on the website after the show. I didn't want to have too much preemptive stuff up there, because I want people to learn about this as I did. I mean, it freaked me out. Now,
actually, Jimmy, they're having to cover it up now, because by digging it out, by excavating it, it's already weathering. So they're having to cover it so that it doesn't weather any further. Yeah, this is kind of miraculous, because had it not been covered up, it probably would have virtually disappeared or totally disappeared. That
Sure,
it
sure.
the rocks and used it for something. Yeah, the whole thing is absolutely amazing.
Well, and
But-
this for me when I look at Göbekli Tepe, this is how my mind works. Okay, this is the mind of Jimmy Church. I look at that, and this is what I think. Somebody had to feed all of these guys. Somebody had to clothe and house and support the construction team behind this massive. This is not small. This is massive on all scale. Somebody had to. There was an entire organization behind Göbekli Tepe too. You had to have masons. You had to have farmers. You had to have infrastructure that supposedly just didn't exist, but it had to be because one guy didn't do it on his own. Him and his brother. It didn't happen. It just didn't happen like that. And the way that it was buried and the carbon dating that was involved with that, it was built over a short period of time too. And
we don't know that.
So
We don't know that.
Well,
we really don't know that. And another thing, Jimmy, we're using our mind to kind of figure out how they did it. They might have had other techniques that didn't require as much labor as we think it did.
Well, exactly, which makes them smarter than they were supposed to be. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Have you seen? Well, yeah. Well, I'll let you jump in a second. On a couple of the columns that are representing, human, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's one thing that freaks me out and they talk about the crossing the hands and the little cheetah guy. That's brilliant. All the 3D reliefs, all that is awesome. But that belt buckle on the belt.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
What that is deep. That is a heavy. It's supposed to be 12,000 years ago, and this guy's got a belt on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The more you look at it, the more amazing it becomes. But even to go back to when you were saying there was no evidence, blah blah blah.
Right.
Actually, there is in fact a lot of evidence, and they've just deliberately ignored it. The Paleolithic caves of Lascaux and what's the other one, Altamira, and most recently, the most spectacular of all, which is the oldest, of Chauvet. You know that one?
Yes.
Chauvet. This is art. This is artistry of Picasso and
yes, absolutely. No, there's no question.
Cave done with people's hands. Now, see, this is again. You have to realize who the academics are. These are basically uncreative people. They've never written a poem. They've never composed a symphony. They've never written a novel. These are uncreative people who live in their heads and badly. And it doesn't occur to them to ask what kind of an intelligence, what kind of an artistic soul is it that allows them to do these unbelievable caves. And Chauvet, they date, and I see no reason to challenge their dating, to 31,000 BC. So what's going on outside? Maybe they're all wearing bearskins, but boy, they sure can't paint.
They could paint, and it was 3D too, not 2D.
And it was 3D too, exactly.
Absolutely.
So everything is wrong, but the Göbekli Tepe makes it clearer it makes it unmistakable so that even those jackasses, at some point, if they don't accept it, they're going to go down with the ship. But if we can get, because this is the plan, to get the money together to do the sequel to The Mystery of the Sphinx, the Charlton Heston show, that actually nails this thing down once and for all. And then everything has, there's a lot hinging on it. It's people's whole.
Well, where do you think it's all leading? Where's it leading where is this all leading to? I mean, it's got to come to a head.
Well, it's leading. It's hard to say exactly where it's leading to. Ideally, it's leading to the understanding.
Lean a little closer to your computer, by the way, your microphone.
It's okay. It's leading to the understanding that everything you've been taught in your schools about ancient history is baloney. And once you understand that you've been misled to a certain up to a certain point deliberately, but a lot of it's not deliberate. It's just not understanding what's going on in ancient times. You question what's going on now. You see, we live in, our education is supposedly secular. I mean, it's, try and question Darwinian evolution, or anyway, not evolution itself, but natural selection, and you get a bunch of people shouting and screaming at you. If we are brought up in the dogma of what I call the Church of Progress, which is that we're the most advanced beings that have ever lived on the face of this planet. This intelligent people with our hydrogen bombs and our striped toothpaste and our poison gas and our bobblehead dolls, this is the best we've ever been. It's pretty clear without any sensitivity at all, just by looking at art. Egypt is a very great game changer for that. You go to Egypt, spend 2 weeks there, you understand in no uncertain terms what a real civilization once was like. But when you can actually prove scientifically that they've got the whole thing wrong, maybe a lot of people start not accepting the garbage that they're taught in their schools and not accepting the notion that we're so damn smart and they were really dumb in those days. And when you have a civilization like Egypt that lasted for 3,000 years and produced all of these masterpieces, maybe you think twice. I understood this. It took a while to get to Egypt, but I understood that we were living in a lunatic asylum at a very early age. But if you intellectually and emotionally recognize that everything you've learned is garbage, and it's not purely negative, that there are models, there are instances of the way that people should behave. In other words, that that our philosophy is dead wrong, that the ideas that we live by, that our education is a farce. In one of my books, I guess it's a case for astrology. I say that Western education is to the mind what AIDS is to the immune system. The more exposure you have to it, the more likely it is to be lethal. Everything,
but you bring up a great point, and this is where even I scratch my head, and it's this: forever, those pyramids were sitting out in the middle of the desert out there. The Sphinx is buried, up to its neck in sand. Right. Nobody knows. It was forgotten about. Nobody knew why they were there. Nobody, and I'm talking about Egyptians. I'm not talking about the French. I'm talking about the Egyptians themselves. They stopped. They forgot how to read their own languages, and the pyramids are just something that were just there. Everything they forgot about their own. So if that's fact, that's not something I'm just making up. But if that is indeed true, then certainly there could have been gaps in not only Egyptian history, but look at Göbekli Tepe. There was something that was built on top of a hill 12,000 years ago, and then was completely forgotten about. Nobody knew it was there. So if there are these gaps, then certainly we could have had a civilization 36,000 years ago, like you said, the last precession, 26,000 years past 10,000 BC. I get that. That was completely forgotten about. Just completely forgotten about. And why, when Göbekli Tepe suddenly surfaces, that's one argument that we have now. But the pyramids were sitting there forever, and nobody knew anything about them. And they were the largest things ever built up until the Eiffel Tower. And they were just sitting there the whole time, but we didn't know. It was a completely forgotten part of history. And so with all of that evidence right in front of us, yeah, it is possible that something we had civilizations, many that have came and went many times over history that we don't know any because we've forgotten about it.
Well, we don't have much. We don't know much precisely, but no, there are records in all of the old mythologies, the Old Testament itself, with Sodom and Gomorrah and ancient civilizations and Plato's Atlantis myth. There are lots of textual references to it, and there are a lot of things that have either been misunderstood or misrepresented or deliberately, not even deliberately, that we're talking about the Paleolithic caves, that there are the caves. I mean, actually, Graham Hancock in his book, it's really, I think, his best book since Sign and the Seal, which is the first book on these subjects. What is it? Supernatural, when he goes into all of his ayahuasca experiences.
Right.
But has a really masterful chapter in there about the Paleolithic caves and the battle to get them recognized as what they are, that they're really ancient and not hoaxes. So, but even to this day, nobody, even Werner Herzog, who's normally is a wonderful director, did this terrible film called The Cave of Forgotten Dreams or something like that.
That's right. I've seen it.
Okay. It was a really stupid film.
No, I like Herzog. Be careful. Be careful.
Oh, no, I like Herzog too. I said he's a wonderful director, but that was a lousy movie. It really didn't get into the significance of what this incredible 31,000 BC cave entails. I mean, this is artwork infinitely more sophisticated than even Lascaux and Altamira, and it's twice as old. So 31,000 BC, you've got artistic geniuses painting stuff on the interior of caves. That in and of itself is a game changer.
Right. And
you don't need any more than that.
Well, and also a lot of those caves, they don't even allow public access to it.
Well, now they don't, but for good reason, because it ruins them. So.
Well, that's true too. I just wanted to let you know, I just got word that we do have some Göbekli Tepe picks up on the website now. So go check that out so you can understand the significance of what we are talking about here. And they are beautiful, by the way.
Yeah.
Now, Gunang, let's talk about Padang, okay, really quick. And Shock, when I have first heard you talk about it, I had never heard about it. Okay,
me either.
I never heard about it, and I remember I did this right with Joe Rogan. By the way, I literally was Googling with him. You remember he Googled in real time. He's like, what was it? Spell that for me. Well, right. I did the same thing. And so just explain really quick. Again, I don't have extensive notes in front of me, but explain the significance of that, because it's potentially way older than Göbekli Tepe.
Well, we don't know. Shock just spent a week there. They invited him. And Shock being Shock, is super cautious.
Well, where is it first for everybody?
Well, it's in Indonesia, and I forget which of the 5 trillion islands it's on.
Right.
It's somewhere, one of those big islands. And these are massive blocks of a basalt, andesite or something like that, to be technical. And these blocks form naturally in vertical columns, of giant, big columns. And Gunung Padang it's not exactly a structure, but these columns are not vertical, they're horizontal, and they're arranged in a certain way, very rough, and it's all covered over. Shock's very cautious about this, but he is pretty well convinced that the only way in which these kinds of columns that are normally naturally vertical, the way they form, he explained to me, but I forget what it is, could be horizontal and on the ground in a kind of a pattern, is that people put them there, that people did this. And then it's a question of when this is. And then...
Well, it's a temple. It's on top of a hill.
We don't know this temple. Jock is very careful about this. And there's a geologist, an Indonesian geologist with an English-sounding name, something Hillman, and then an Indonesian name after that. But Jock's cautious assessment is that this is another smoking gun, that this is something very, very, very old and man-made or man reconfigured, something of that sort.
Well, it's definitely it's a definite it's a construction. These blocks. And this is just my memory, but it was a definite construction, and it exists on the top of this hill, and it's like acres. It's not small. It's very large,
right.
And now aren't they talking about this being maybe even 20,000 years old? Am I wrong?
Well, they're talking about it, but Shock being Shock is, there's not enough evidence there for him to even hazard a date. All he's willing to do at the moment, and this is good because you have to be that.
Right.
If you're a real scientist, you have to be super cautious. And actually, we were talking about Shock being on the show. He'll explain more precisely than I can, because I'm just doing it from memory, what he's seen. I mean, he was out there for a few days. So if you have him on the show, he'll get into it. But that's another potential smoking gun.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, everything that was convenient about Göbekli Tepe, the carbon dating and the filling and everything, you don't have that up at Padang. And so,
not yet.
Yeah,
not yet.
Exactly.
Not
so,
yet, but you might if you do more work, and because these things go down deep, and if you can date, if the construction, as it were, whatever it is, if you're finding things that are horizontal, that should be vertical by nature, as it were, and you can date the stuff that's around them, that's how you date things. I mean, that's how you date Göbekli, that's how you date Chauvet and Lascaux and all of those places, because of things around them. You can't date the paint on the rocks.
Well, the first time you went to Göbekli Tepe, how did it hit you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it really hit. I mean, had I not known that it was dated by Klaus Schmidt, by the archaeologist himself, at 10,000, 12,000 BC, I would have said, well, this is pretty spectacular, but I wouldn't have thought it was older than, let's say, things in pre-dynastic Egypt, because in fact the artistic style is, or styles, because there are several styles. I'm sure it's built over time, because some of the work is really gorgeous and precise, and some of it is really quite crude. So you don't know which comes first. Generally speaking, or often, I should say, not generally speaking, but often the finest work is the earliest work. So I would have been seriously impressed. But since I went there knowing that Schmidt was putting it back to 10,000 BC and his colleagues were not, throwing rocks at him, because the dating techniques that he was using were, what is generally accepted by the Orthodox community.
Right.
So this was, it's pretty impressive.
I got to keep you leaning forward to your microphone. You're getting so comfortable. I'm looking at you, and you're
uncomfortable. What am I supposed to do? Be uncomfortable for hours?
But yeah, exactly. Walking up to go back. I haven't been there. I would love to go more sooner than later, of course. But walking up on that, you're exactly right. You walk up on it, you look, and you're like, okay, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's, for something old, all right. Yeah. But when you walk up knowing that it's 10, 12,000 years old, now that's a whole nother cup of tea.
That's right.
And it just...
and the state of preservation is what's so amazing, because it was covered up. It looks like it was carved the day before yesterday. I mean, it's really...
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's one thing that's right. I have to ask you this. When I look at how everything is constructed and how it's placed and the columns. And for everybody out there, go look at the website, look at the pics that are up, so you can understand what I'm saying. It looks like, and I've heard a little talk about this, not much, but to me, when I first saw it, it looked to me like there must have been like beams, maybe wood beams going around, and maybe like a roof was possibly on. Have you thought about that? Do you think these were covered? I mean, Stonehenge wasn't, didn't have a roof on it. I don't, but it looks
No,
to
I've
me
seen
like.
some. Well, is it somebody did an artistic thing? I think I think it might at some point or another. I mean, I think the stone circles, which are not covered, for some cosmological, astronomical reason.
Right.
I mean, really, this is a big mystery. Why the hell do you need 25 stone circles?
Well,
I think at a later stage, they might well have roofed it over and used them for houses or something of the sort.
And that's why I wanted to touch upon that, because these aren't homes. There's no evidence of cooking. There's no fire pits. There's no hearths. There's no.
But then they've covered them over. When you look at it, you see that there are these stark stone circles, massive 2 columns in between to begin with, and then another circle of large stones, and then those have been packed in with really rubble, which looks as though maybe they were made into dwellings by people who didn't know what they were supposed to be.
Right. Oh, by a later group of
something.
Right.
I don't know.
Well,
when you're there, you get a real sense of several stages of construction, with the most spectacular stuff being the original and the oldest.
What do you think the original intention was? Because you had to have, in the beginning, the first one was built, so you've got some kind of, a leader of a group of people, and we're going to build this. Okay, so what do you think the original intention? Because that's wide open. But what's your theory? What do you think?
I don't know. I mean,
that's not the answer I want. I don't know.
Another guy you have to have on your show is Laird Scranton. Do you know his work?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, well, Laird is finding, because he's really, is an expert at showing the cosmology, the universal cosmology that's behind. I feel that he's done very important work. The universal cosmology that's behind all of the ancient sort of mythologies and all of the ancient systems of explaining the universe. I mean, he started out with the Dogon in Egypt, and then that expanded now to the Buddhist and the Chinese and all sorts of things. And now he's been looking into Göbekli Tepe and finding in these strange reliefs. We have discussions going back and forth with good friends of what the reliefs actually are symbolize.
Right. But I mean, what's
cosmological? But why they should do it in the first place? We don't know. We don't know why they built. We don't know why they built Stonehenge or the pyramids.
Okay, you know what? I'll go down the list if you want. I've got you here. Let's just go down the list. The pyramids. Let's start with the Great Pyramid.
Yeah.
Egyptologists are going to tell you that it's a tomb, right? Yeah. Okay. There's a sarcophagus. I see the sarcophagus, but okay. No, I'm not going to answer for you. What was the Great Pyramid built for?
I don't know. You get the sense, and when you're involved in these things, if there's a big difference between a scholar and an artist. Scholars work with their heads. They tend not to be emotionally connected to things. Artists work differently. You work from your gut. And sometimes it's good to combine the two. My sense when I go into a pyramid is that, and has always been, that it is a device of some sort. It's a machine of some sort. There was even a national, I always call the National Geographic, the National Pornographic Society, because when I was a kid, the only place you could ever look at naked women is if you had a subscription to the National Geographic.
Well, I used to hear those rumors too, but every National Geographic I picked up when I was a kid, I was robbed. There was nothing there. But
well, you were too young.
So when you go on one of your tours, and we'll talk about that in the next segment. But when you go, what if I'm walking behind you? We're walking in. We're gonna you're gonna take me into the Great Pyramid, and I tap you on your shoulder and I go, okay, John, well, why is this here? What is it? What's your answer?
And my answer is shut up and let's talk about it afterwards. Because when you're in there, it's better to go in silence. But no, seriously, it's the National Geographic had this sort of, a wink, wink, nod, nod, and called them immortality machines. Well, I think that's what they were. They are designed in some way or another to enhance or promote a certain psychological, state of higher consciousness. And you have to remember, see, when you get back to Egypt, we haven't even talked about symbolist Egypt. It's almost incomprehensible in the age of the Church of Progress to imagine a civilization that is entirely a one-issue civilization. It is devoted in its entirety to the immortality of the soul, which is a wink, wink, nod, nod issue to our own Church of Progress.
Yes.
Right? Well,
right.
When you go in there, the pyramid, all of the pyramids are very different from everything else in Egypt. My conviction is that all of the attention is put onto the Great Pyramid. I think the three pyramids of Giza and the two of Dashur, and maybe the ruinous one called Abu Rosh, supposedly built by Jedefra, the son of one of the sons of Khufu.
Right.
I think there's a kind of a unified pyramid field or plan, and you can't just look at the Great Pyramid because some of the others are almost as spectacular, and in certain instances even more spectacular. There's some good reason for doing those incredible structures that has nothing whatever to do with them being tombs. They're devices.
Go ahead.
Well,
sorry. What's your theory? What's your theory about in the Great Pyramid? There's no writing or hieroglyphics there.
No, not in any of them. There's
some in the Step Pyramid, right?
Oh yeah, well that's older.
Yeah.
Well, actually, even that is we're pretty sure. Too bad. You got to come on a trip one of these days.
Absolutely.
That's built over something that's much older as well. This is another piece of the theory that we have still to prove, so there's no point talking about it now.
Right. But
the pyramids are totally different. They're meant to do something, and I'm not sure what it is, but I tell you that we rent the pyramid for 2 hours. You can do this. It's perfectly legal on my trips. And you spend 2 hours in the meditation section in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, and if you don't come out understanding that you've had some kind of a very special experience, it means that you're emotionally defective.
Do you think we've discovered everything inside of that pyramid that is to be discovered? After Great Gatenbrink's door and all of that, when that went down.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. Again, it's not really a door. I'll tell you, there's a theory. It's not my theory. It's a theory of a friend of mine. That we think that pyramid and all of the other pyramids are built in stages. The Great Pyramid is not as definitive, but the Khafra Pyramid, the second pyramid, is no doubt that it's built at least in 2 stages, maybe more stages. And we think that.
Well, why would you say that? Again, you just want to just
architectural styles. When you see, let's say, if you see a medieval turret in the middle of a 18th century Georgian Palladian manor house, you know that you're looking at 2 different stages of construction, right?
Right.
If you have Victorian house here in America somewhere.
It's got an addition built on the back.
With
Sure.
a modern kitchen.
Right.
You know that the kitchen was not built in 1847, right? Well, so when you see different architectural styles employed in the same building, you know, any architectural historian would say that you know that you're talking about two different periods of construction. So in the Khafra pyramid, this is absolutely obvious. And in the Red Pyramid of Dashur, you see the whole pyramid built over what is obviously, they call it a ruined, a plundered tomb chamber, which is really stupid. A lot of stuff in Egyptology is stupid.
Right.
It's not a plundered tomb chamber. It's a ruined megalithic construction. It's quite clear that it's a totally different architectural style that for whatever reason, whoever built the Red Pyramid just left it intact, it's ruinous, and built the whole pyramid over it. So you have loads of evidence that says that the pyramids are built on different stages, and even the quackademics acknowledge that, or agree, that the whole of the Giza Plateau is based upon a single ground plan. So we think that, given that the Sphinx is a hell of a lot older than it's supposed to be, that the pyramids, even if the present pyramids are built, or what we see is built when they're supposed to have been built, and maybe they were, I'm not sure, 2500 or so BC, they are superimposed over or replace structures that were there right from the beginning whenever they built the Sphinx.
Okay, I've got two questions.
Why?
I just got two questions that just came in. Obviously, they're listening to the show in real time, so
it
came in a couple of minutes apart. But what is the single most important discovery besides the Sphinx that you have made?
I didn't make the Sphinx discovery. I just developed the theory.
You know, you stirred the pot is what you did.
I stirred the pot. I sure did stir the pot.
Is there anything that stands out for you? I mean, what do you think was besides the Sphinx?
What did I discover? No, it's not really, no. I mean, I discovered a lot of stuff, little stuff, but it implements, not so little, but it implements the whole symbolist theory. I think what I've done that's most important is making Schwaller's interpretation of symbolist Egypt more or less accessible to a wide audience, because Schwaller, now it's all translated. When I did my book originally, it was just in French, but Schwaller is a very, very difficult, almost impenetrable writer unless you have a certain kind of background in these things, which I had. But yeah, I think making Schwaller accessible is really the most important thing that I've done.
Well, when you talk about what's the second, the other pyramid, really quick, I'm brain freezing right now.
The one in Dashur?
No, on Giza, next to the Great Pyramid.
Khafra.
Yeah, the Khafra pyramid. So you're saying that was built in two stages, and you're saying that it's obvious. What does Zahi Hawass say about that?
Well, we haven't discussed that, but it was very funny because it was pointed out to me by our arch enemy Mark Lehner. You have these gigantic blocks on the lower courses of the pyramid irregularly, but I mean huge blocks, weigh 100 and something tons, very carefully dressed, and then piled up on top of them the much rougher, typical Old Kingdom construction of the core masonry, and then it would have been all covered over with casing stones. Anyway, this is one of the problems with even if we're on Skype, stuff that is so crystal clear visually when you're in Egypt is very difficult to explain without when I do a slide lecture, I can make these points. It's very difficult just in words, even though you can see me, you can't see the evidence, to show how very clear this is, that it's built in stages. It's really clear. And Chuck and I, we think that the Great Pyramid is also built in stages. but the evidence is much subtler, and it's difficult to talk about just in so many words. But we're pretty sure between ourselves that the earliest stages of those pyramids go back way, way early, whenever they built the Sphinx. But why they built the Sphinx and the pyramids in the first place, we don't know either.
Well,
except that they have something to do with the quest. The whole civilization, all of the ancient civilizations, are based upon the understanding that we have a role to play in this grand universe of ours. And that role is, to put it into words as succinctly as possible, the development of the soul, the immortality of the soul. This is not superstition. What superstition is that we have no role to play in the universe, but that we have something that we're supposed to be doing cosmically, and that these amazing constructions all over, not just Egypt, but all over, are built in order to enhance that quest.
Well, we were talking earlier this week about technology and the internet and the accessibility now with knowledge and libraries and electronic libraries but we did not talk about what I'm about to ask you now, and I kind of held this off for a little bit, and we've got a little bit of time before we go into the next segment. So what with the proliferation of ancient aliens and all of the coverage on network television, it's all over the place now on the internet, and I've had a lot of guests on this show. We had Jason Martell on a couple of weeks ago from Ancient Aliens. What do you think about where do you stand on because if you watch these programs, which I do, if you watch these programs, obviously everything it was caused by an alien intervention. Everything, no matter what. Well, the Eiffel Tower, it was whatever. But where do you stand with this? With all of this huge influx of, and it's all over the place now. Where do you stand on this ancient alien aspect in ancient Egypt?
Well, I don't categorically deny it, but I don't see anything that looks like evidence to support it. It's a kind of a cop-out. In other words, we can't explain how or why they did these things. Therefore, it must have been aliens. But then this is a kind of galactic Darwinism. How did they get so smart? And why should they do it? There's zero evidence, as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. All there is conjecture. And why exactly this should have the kind of allure that it has, I don't quite understand, because if you look at it, and even on a more profound point of view, let's say I've been talking just now about this whole question of immortality of the soul. In other words, this is a discipline. All of the religions, no matter how stupid they look and how grotesque they've become, are based upon the understanding that we have a role to play in this great cosmos of ours. And the ancient alien hypothesis is, as I said, a kind of galactic Darwinism. It takes the responsibility off us. All of these smart ancient people came down, and for whatever reason, I mean, if you're a Sitchinini, with the Nibiru and his whatever the hell,
right,
all this kind of garbage, and all of a sudden, all of these smart aliens who were at least as malignant as ourselves came down and bred with the subspecies humans and all of the rest of it, and that's where all of the gods come from and so on.
I understand that where you connect that it's an easy way out. It's an easy answer. It's just a blanket. I get that. But for all of us, and I put myself in this camp, for all of us, when we look at something like, again, Göbekli Tepe or the pyramids, where you have ancient man is walking around clubbing women in the head,
No,
and you go, but hold on, let me finish. Where you suddenly go from that, and they want us to accept that, and then the next day they know how to carve 50-ton stones out of a quarry and get them across the desert. There's something there that bridges that gap, and I don't know what it is. I don't. But if you suggest this, where the possibility of that, absolutely, you cannot. I can't dismiss it. There's nothing that says it didn't happen, but we all want that answer. How did we get from A to B? And that leap, John, and you agree with me, was a huge one. I mean, that is a lot of knowledge. You go from trying to figure out how you're going to light a fire one day to suddenly carving Luxor. I mean, how do you bridge that gap?
Jimmy, you're buying into the Orthodox explanation that they're clubbing women across the head.
Oh, no, I'm not.
We don't know that. We don't know what the hell they were doing.
Right,
You look at a lot of the ancient texts, some of them explicitly, some of them implicitly, talk about higher levels of civilization that existed in a very distant past. The Garden of Eden may be an instance of it, that people... There's a good book written, what's his name, back in the 80s, about the Golden Age. That this is a reality, that people in the very distant past were actually more civilized than we were, because basically they walked with the gods. They didn't need any of this fancy stuff that we've subsequently developed in an attempt to get back to that original state of grace. I have no problem with that. I just can't prove it, so it's not scholarship.
Right.
But we know that, people were living for a few 100,000 years, at least, maybe millions. And, they keep pushing the dates back further. They're painting stuff in caves. Goes back now, I think, in Australia to 75 or 80,000 BC.
Right.
We're assuming that they're primitive beings who can't think and who beat their women across the head with clubs. This is a Church of Progress. This is Church of Progress propaganda. They don't know. I don't know either. But
all right. Well, this is a good spot to take another break. Let's go ahead and do that. And when we come back, we're gonna talk about Atlantis, one of my favorite subjects. This is Fade to Black. We are live with John Anthony West from New York on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
Hi everybody, this is Rob Halford, the Metal God on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? My name's Brian Taylor, Ninja Badass Extraordinaire, and this is JimmyChurchRadio.com.
JJZR in your face.
JimmyChurchRadio.com on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church, brought to you by KJCR. Special thanks to, by the way, Keith Rowland. Keith, you are the man on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Keep all of the questions coming. I'm reading them as they come in. And we're trying to keep stuff up on the website. Shoot me an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. We've gotten a bunch in. But with a guy like John Anthony West, it's hard for me to get my questions in, let alone yours. And I want to say that tomorrow night we're going to do a John Teeter special. Now, last week I had, just let my mind wander on the John Teeter subject. And John Teeter was a time traveler that Art Bell was instrumental in, not only in the story of the story of John Teeter, but the entire mythology behind it. And there's legend, and then there's legendary, and there's definitions of both. But John Teeter fills both of those, and I got a bunch of email and reaction to my little mind trip. So it allowed me to go out and reach out to Larry Haber. We're going to have Larry Haber on tomorrow night. Larry is the attorney for the John Teeter Foundation and family, still represents the family, and he's got a bunch of stuff. We were talking today earlier on the phone, and I just cannot believe what we are going to lay out there tomorrow night. And this isn't any kind of teaser. I was blown away. So I just can't wait until tomorrow night. It's going to be fantastic. Now, this is the thing. John, you got a minute to talk about John Teeter for a second? Because we have to tell everybody a little bit. This is earlier this week, John and I have spent a lot of time talking this week on the phone. And I said, you know what? There's something I want you to go and check out this thing, John Teeter. So you did. You went and listened. And then the thing was, as you called me back, I'm in my car and you were like, I can't stop listening to this. This is crazy. Did this really happen? This is fascinating. And it is all of that, isn't it? The John Teeter story is crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's lasted now for 13 years. Now, this is not the John Teeter show, but I the way that it hit you, Mr. West, is the way that it hit everybody the first time that they heard about it. It is, you know what I mean? It just grabs you and sucks you in. And I'm glad it did that to you. So I hope that you listen. Are you going to listen tomorrow night?
I will try. I'm not easy to suck in.
and I suck. I got you, didn't I? I did.
Oh, yeah. You did. And fascinating. Absolutely. Now, sort of, on that subject, there are a lot of things that are fascinating. The UFO phenomenon is fascinating. The alien intervention, which I said, as far as I'm concerned, I don't see any evidence to support it, really, but I also don't see any particular evidence to discredit it. But I call myself sometimes a mystic in skeptic's clothing. But I have
right.
I have a criterion, which is, what do I do with it? What use is it?
Well, have you ever seen something in the sky that you can't explain?
No, but I know lots of people who have, and I believe it. But how do I use it? What do I do with it? In other words, if my goal is, and I'll be very frank about this now, it's for me, it's philosophical, it's spiritual. I'm in the Gurdjieff work. And if people don't know about the Gurdjieff work, they should, if they're interested, look into maybe P.D. Uspensky's In Search of the Miraculous. It's a discipline. And let me get into Gurdjieff a little bit, because he's a very remarkable guy, and I won't take up a lot of time with him here, but I always found living in this lunatic asylum very difficult. And I was convinced that it was a lunatic asylum at a very early age. And when I was living in Ibiza,
is that your dog in the background? What is that?
No, that's my Egyptian.
Let me see.
Come here, Samu. Can you see him?
Oh my goodness!
He's the ancient Egyptian greyhounds that stayed pure on the island of Ibiza.
Absolutely beautiful, and he wants some attention, and he's not getting it, is he?
Well, he wants to. He's old and he's got arthritis, and he wants to go out. And I'm really freezing out, so I've got to put a jacket on him to go out and let him out. Anyway, he'll be okay. When I'm talking about sort of the quest for immortality, this is not an intellectual exercise. This is a discipline, and if I can't use it, I'm being very practical. If I can't use the knowledge, it's just curiosity, the same that killed the cat.
Sure.
I'm very interested. I mean, crop circles, I think, are absolutely fascinating.
Hey, did you hear about did you see the crop
You
circle
bet.
that was here in California?
Sure, yeah, I get all that stuff.
Well, did you see what they did to it today?
No, they said they were going to trash it.
They plowed it over, the farmer.
Stupid assholes.
He literally plowed it over.
Well, who knows? There would have been people crawling all over his field. They do that in England too. Did they get any samples? Because if they test them, they find
No, they rushed out there. Everybody was waiting to get in and check it out. Now I'm crop circles and me are I don't know. My BS meter is a little bit funky on that, but this
not
one,
mine. I'm absolutely convinced that they're for real, but I don't see how to use them for anything that, let's say, furthers my personal quest. Same with aliens, same with UFOs. I'm fascinated by it. Mostly, I'm interested in them in the sense that if you can prove them, they embarrass the high priests of the Church of Progress, and to anything that serves to disempower the rationalist, materialist philosophy has value.
Well, the thing,
but I can't use it personally for myself.
Well, this is the thing with crop circles, and I don't want to spend I don't want to spend any time on it, but I just want to address this: is that the thing is with all of the cameras out there, and all the helicopters and airplanes and everything, we have yet to have actually caught somebody. So that's the part that's pretty fascinating, and they are intricate, and I get all of that. I do. I get it. So, but the theories behind it and how it's done, wow, I don't know. And I'm an open mind as anybody, but so anyway, I want to move on.
Okay.
There's been nobody's been caught. That's the thing. It's kind of like the John Teeter thing. Nobody's been caught, so that just leaves it open to you can write your own story and your own theory on it. And so, okay, all right. So that's where I'm okay with it. But I want to get to Atlantis, and I want to talk about Japan a little bit too as well. But Atlantis, where are we today? I have been waiting. I've been waiting. There's so many things that point to whether it's in the Mediterranean or it's outside of Gibraltar or the Bahamas. Where are we today with Atlantis?
I don't think it's any of those things, and in fact, I haven't thought so from the beginning. Even when I wrote "Serpent in the Sky," which is published, I think, in '79. Mm-hmm. Whenever I have a long chapter on the mystery of the water weathering of the Sphinx, which brings up the whole question of the A word, as Shock and I call it, dare mention Atlantis. And I would even then, smart enough to put it between inverted quotes so that it was not necessarily a place, but my original idea, which seems to be in the process of being borne out now, was that it's a global civilization that went down under catastrophic circumstances somewhere around 13,000 or so BC. Now, all of the knowledge that we have, and this can be pretty quick, 2 books that everybody has to read who wants to really get a handle on Atlantis, because there are a million books. It's here, it's there, it's off the coast of Spain, it's in the Bahamas, all of this stuff. I don't believe any of this. 2 books. One, a book written by a professor of musicology at Colgate University named Jocelyn Godwin, Godwin, called Atlantis and the Cycles of Time, which is sort of it's the only book you have to read on Atlantis to understand all of the different conflicting theories. And another book, more difficult, or less accessible, called The Pythagorean Plato, by another musicologist called Ernest G. McLean, spelled McClain, which decodes the whole Plato myth as a musical allegory designed by Plato for his own students, who are all musically musically instructed to teach them about through the laws of harmony, how harmony becomes disharmony. In other words, it's kind of an object lesson of how, let's say, how a civilization descends into tyranny via the rules of music. And McLean I've never met. We corresponded a little bit. I think if he's still alive, he's well in his 90s, he's older than me. And initially, I knew from mutual friends that he was very opposed to the whole Sphinx theory. In other words, he thought there was no historical validity to the Plato myth, to the Timaeus whatsoever. And then subsequently, he realized that the geology is the geology. And what I think it is that Plato really did hear about this lost civilization from his grandfather Solon, who got it from an Egyptian priest. But the only part that's actually historical is that there's a civilization that went down in flames under some circumstances, whenever. And then Plato constructed this musical allegory, because, if you read the Timaeus, there are X number of motes and there's this number of columns, and everything's very precise mathematically.
Right.
How would Solon know all of that stuff? So he constructed this, but based upon an actual historical Atlantis, not necessarily in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, but rather a global civilization that went down under catastrophic circumstances. And the work of Laird Scranton and a number of other people seem to be implementing that. Chuck is on board with that as well. So, yeah, there was an Atlantis, but it's not here, it's not there, it's not somewhere else. It's everywhere. Again, Bible. At one point in time,
so
everybody had a common language.
So are you suggesting, I want to follow you on this, are you suggesting that Atlantis was a globe, like occupied all the continents? It was just...
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Because Laird...
Well, what evidence... Okay, I understand what you're saying, but what evidence do you have to support that? Anything besides Plato?
Yeah, a lot. In other words, the cosmologies, the work that Laird's doing is showing that the same cosmology is apparent everywhere you look. He started off with Egypt and the Dogon, and then that connects with the latest wrinkles in our own sort of advanced cosmology, which is scientifically accurate but leaves out the meaning. They don't want to touch the meaning part, which the ancients, of course, did. But it's all over. The Chinese, all of the different African tribes, the Polynesians, the Buddhists, are all the symbolism of the stupa is the same as the symbolism of the granary that the Dogon used. So
right.
In other words, the evidence is there in that there are parallel cosmologies wherever you look. The civilizations, the societies diverge in terms of their practices and so on, but there's a core similarity,
relationship
in their relationship, in their cosmologies. And
well,
that's
okay, I get that. Evidence. Well, do you think that? Well, I don't want to state the obvious, but do you think that the pyramids that are found on each continent too? Are you suggesting that maybe that learned, that came down from just one source? Are you saying that was possible?
Well, the one source may have been global, you see. In other words, it's not necessarily an island here. In other words, if it's everywhere, and then suddenly the whole thing gets blown out of the sky, there's some tremendous catastrophe, well, and a few people survive who have that knowledge, well, then at a certain point they re-manifest it in their own way, and yet if you know what you're looking for, you find the parallels. And I think Laird's work is really doing that. And as I said, intuitively, this was what I got out of my own studies way back in the 70s, and why I put Atlantis between inverted quotes, that it was not here, it was not there, it was everywhere. And it was destroyed.
Well, where does this date come from, 10,000, 12,000 years ago for Atlantis? Where do you get
Well,
this date from?
Partly it comes from Plato, partly for whatever that's worth.
Right.
But in fact, there's a certain backup for that, because when the sea levels rose, there are certain key points where it's thought, one theory anyway, good guy, geologist who wrote it, I forget his name, taught at Florida University, that there's a certain point when the ice is melting, when there's a huge ice dam across all of North America, and when it bursts, this unbelievable volume of water races down central, the middle of America, scouring out the Mississippi Valley and into the oceans, and that brings the sea levels up a lot quickly. Within let's say a week or so, the sea levels rise enormously. So there's a certain geological backup to the whole notion of a sea level rise. Not necessarily that there's an Atlantis in the middle of the ocean, because that doesn't seem to be geologically acceptable, but that the sea levels rise a lot quickly, there's some really serious evidence for that.
Well,
and
go ahead. Go ahead. Finish, because I have a question. Well, what I mean is this: Plato. It's always been thought that Atlantis was an island, but so you're suggesting that
that's strictly from Plato.
That's strictly from Plato. Oh, and by the way,
only Plato.
Well, but the other thing is this, and we base a lot on the way Plato's description of what Atlantis looked like and so forth. But didn't we base a lot of our knowledge on Giza and the pyramids from Plato? I mean,
no.
Wasn't that all Greek theory?
No, what theory?
I'm talking about the age of the Sphinx, or the age of Giza, and who built the pyramids and what pharaohs built the pyramids.
That's strictly Egyptology. That has nothing to do with Plato. Nothing whatsoever.
Okay.
None.
All right.
Yeah.
Again, we're just talking on a front porch. That's it. This is just a conversation. I need to be straightened out once in a while too.
Yeah. No. So actually, McLean. It's complicated. I mean, I'm not a musicologist or a musician, so I have trouble following the numbers. But as far as I can tell, and people who do understand the numbers say, yeah, this is absolutely sound. It's a musical allegory, but based upon a real story, that there was this ancient civilization, not that it was an island in the middle of the Atlantic, but that it was global. And that corresponds to a lot of the ancient mythologies, including the Bible. It talks about Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, these are civilizations that go down in flames for whatever reason. It pops up in Ragnarok, in the Norse mythologies, the death of the gods. Wherever you hear about the gods being tired, which pops up all over the place.
Right.
This is astrological. Basically, it's the end of an age, which we're at the middle of now. You put all of the evidence together. What's his name? De Santillana van Dekend and Hamlet's Mill talk about the astronomical aspects of all of the ancient myths, and they carefully, because they're MIT historians of science, so they don't want to get into things like astrology. But as soon as you learn that practically all ancient civilizations that we know of had this obsession with astronomy, when you ask why, well, it has to be because it's astrological. In other words, it's the meaning of these movements of the planets. And there's a ton of stuff out there that.
Well, everything. When I say everything, all of the megalithic, from Stonehenge to Pumapunku and Tiwanaku and Egypt, and
right.
Just about anything you point at, there's some kind of astrological significance to it, or they're able to tie, I should say, a significance to it. Speaking, we didn't get a chance to talk about Pumapunku. Have you been? To Bolivia?
No, Jacques has. So he's the guy you want to talk to about that. I've not been there. I've not been to the South American sites at all, but he has. Okay. So you were talking about having him on, so that's something he can talk about.
Well, it's just for Puma Punku to be, it could be just like Göbekli Tepe is.
I hope so.
If it is truly, 10 to 15,000 years old as some are suggesting, then again, is it a smoking gun? Well,
Sure,
that would be right.
All of them smoking gun. Shock is really into the whole Easter Island thing. We think Göbekli Tepe is kind of the smoking gun, but we think there's a whole arsenal out there, and the dots have to be connected. Maybe by us, maybe by other people. Wait, two things. Wait a second. This dog's going crazy here.
Okay.
Can you hang on one second?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I put on his coat and let him out. Hold on.
Yeah. You go and do that. Actually, that's a good spot for me to take a break. And this is JimmyChurchRadio.com. I appreciate everybody coming in. Don't forget that tomorrow night we are doing John Teeter, and it will be a show with Larry Haber. And I'm going to go ahead and take a break while John is tending to his dog. I needed to get a break in anyway. I've got some more questions that are coming in. We are on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Don't touch that mouse. Be back in 2 minutes.
This is William from La Crescenta, and I listen to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Jimmy Church. My name is Alan, and I listen to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
He's always giving it to you straight.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network. Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio, the revolution.
All right, everybody, welcome back. To everybody listening around the world, this is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. We are live from New York. We've got John Anthony West in the studio, but I do want to talk really quick about a couple of things that we are doing here on the network. We are going to correct speech. We are going to have a show that we're going to put together with all of the hosts. We have 24 different shows on the network, and we're going to get together, and I think we're going to call it, should I say this, Keith? Host to host, where we're going to get together. Yeah, exactly. And it was kind of funny. I had said to everybody, I said, doesn't that sound like something else? But you know what? It's what it really is. And we're going to get together and we're going to talk about not only things that are current in ufology and the paranormal, but also what we're doing on our shows and what's coming up and some exciting things that we're working on. So look out for that. We're putting that together now, and I'm pretty excited about it. And like I said, coming up next, we have Spooky South Coast with Tim Weisberg. Really cool show. That'll be up, I think that's on at 10 o'clock PST right after us. I believe we're going to roll straight into that. But, okay, so, John, are you back?
Yes, I'm here. Can you see me?
Yeah, everything good. Well, you remember, you're to my left. You're to my right. The studio is out in front of me. And I would feel really weird. See, you can see me, but what if I was like, what if I was like this?
I can't see you.
Oh, you can't. Oh, no. Oh, the video's off.
I guess. Yeah. I can't see you.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought you were okay.
Anyway, hey, listen. I want to say something actually, because we talked a bit about my trips, but I want to point out to people who are listening that I've got 2 trips coming up. One is with a group called the Enneagram Institute that I've done a number of trips with. It's a very special trip, and normally it's entirely taken up by their members. It's sort of it's derived from the Gurdjieff teaching, And this is solid stuff. And it's a bit more expensive than my regular trips because we get my guy who tour operator in Egypt has the best boat on the Nile. When Suzanne Mubarak wanted a boat to take friends on up the Nile, she took this boat.
Who?
Suzanne Mubarak.
No kidding.
This boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the best boat on the Nile. It's a little, it's a private yacht actually with 8 cabins, so it's a limited to 16 people on the trip. Anyway, few people can. Normally it's full up, but a few people canceled out, and as of right now, when I'm talking, there are still two berths left. So anybody wants to grab those 2 berths, it's on my website, Enneagram Institute. I'm not exactly sure how you find it.
No. You can just go. The links are right there at jimmychurchradio.com, and they can certainly do that. But if you don't mind, can I talk to you a little about your trips?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Right.
Well, you and I were talking the other day, and I had told you that my wife and I, Rita, we have our little bucket list of things that we need to get out of the way before we depart this great planet of ours. And number one is Giza. That's it. I mean, we've got, Greece and the Acropolis, all of that stuff is there. But number one is Giza. And of course, I said, next year you're going to be my personal tour guide. And you said, Jimmy, anytime. But when you go, first off, do you go to the Valley of the Kings?
Yeah, we go all of those places.
Well, hold on. I'm going to go down the list. You go to the Valley of the Kings, and I do want to talk about that. You had said, but you said also that you guys rent. I want to make this clear. You guys rent the Great Pyramid?
Yeah, it's perfectly legal. We rent it for 2 hours and have a meditation session in there.
You go into the Great Pyramid.
Well, everyone can go into the Great Pyramid, but we have it privately to ourselves for 2 hours, and we have a meditation session in there. And hold on, goddamn dogs!
Man, that just blows my mind.
Mull on that for a second.
Well, John and I were talking the other day on the phone, and we talked for like 3 hours, and I'm trying to get the idea of what, he was telling me that he goes on 4 of these trips a year. And the access where they're renting the Great Pyramid, they're going in, and I forgot to ask him about the Valley of the Kings, which is something that I'm totally fascinated with. But I don't think there's any part of Egypt that and Giza that they don't touch upon. But so, John, how many people are in this tour? Is it 10? Is it 20?
No, this one is.
No, I mean just in general. You're doing 4 of these a year, so. When you go over, I mean, how intimate is it? How many?
It's pretty intimate. Generally, on this trip, because we're because of the private boat that we're on, which has 8 cabins, we're limited to 16. So it has to be a bit more expensive but we get the boat at a special price anyway. So this is really an incredible trip. Regularly, I've got a limit of 22, 24 on the trip. So it's pretty intimate. It's more than that. We can't get into places that are constricted. But all of them we do. We rent the pyramid. We get into all the various places. I mean, really, it's a pretty good in terms of finance. It's a hell of a lot cheaper than the baloney tours that you get with the Smithsonian.
I'm sure
it's
of
more
that.
Expensive. It's more expensive than the cheapo tours, but you have me involved.
Well, I'm going to ask the obvious question, though. Are there any security issues?
At the moment, see, everybody's scared stiff because the prostitutes of the world talk about, in a way, they're not lying for a change. But they're not covering the whole issue. Yeah, this stuff is going on. I think they've broken the military has broken the back of the Muslim Missile Brotherhood, which is good because religious fundamentalists are the worst. Even the military is better to have in charge than religious fundamentalists.
Sure, but security is not an issue. So if somebody...
No, they have not. No, listen. I was there during the whole of the revolution in 2011. It's on my website under the Phoenix Fire blogs called the 5-Star Revolution. It was incredible experience. They're not after us, and they haven't been after us, and they're not going to be after us if we're tourists. We don't go near where the protests are going on. It's very simple. And now with cell phones everywhere, you know where the protests are going on. So it's actually safer than it was in the 90s when the stupid Muslim imbeciles were actually gunning for the tourists. And there were a number of, the massacre at the Hatshepsut Temple in 97, because those idiots thought that if they ruined the tourist industry, everybody would suddenly vote for the Muslim imbeciles and get Mubarak out of there. And of course, exactly the opposite happened. They took away the living of a couple of million Egyptians who are living off the tourist industry.
Well,
anyway,
the tourism for Egypt, that's got to be, what is that, their main export, so to speak?
It's their third or fourth biggest money spinner. First is, I think, the Suez Canal.
Oh, right.
Second is, or was, money being sent back into Egypt by Egyptians who left and were sending money back to their friends. Third is something else. I forget what it is. Maybe third is tourism, but it may be third in terms of volume, but the money from the canal just goes to the government. Tourism is a living, living wage for millions of Egyptians. So
the tourism trade there has been greatly affected. I mean, so what's it like there now when you go there as a tour group? Are you the only ones there?
It's an ill wind that blows no good. For us, it's heaven. Yeah, to be in Egypt when there's nobody there. I mean, this hasn't happened since about 1820.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. You just can't imagine what it's like when no one's there. But my sense of it is, we'll see if I'm right, but I've been pretty right up to now, that the military is not going to take any baloney from the Muslim imbeciles. They may try and make some trouble, but they're not going to win. And once it's understood, and even the prostitutes have to acknowledge that Egypt is safe, tourism is going to flood back in a hurry, because there are a lot of people who want to go there. And once it's recognized as being safe, it'll all go back to normal, which means that it's a zoo. I mean, I'm pretty good at having done it all these years, of avoiding the zoo no matter what. I mean, we get up at the crack of dawn, and I mean, this is a tough trip.
Well, what happens to archaeology when there's all of this, the violence and the uprising that went on? Does all of that does that grind to a halt, or?
No, because none of it is, at least as far as I know, none of it is affecting work on the site. So the archaeologists, I think, are busy working as normal. So it's better for them because there are no tourists getting in their way, even though normally they have everything cordoned off so they don't let the tourists in where they're actually working. No, it's fine. Okay. I mean, I've been there ever since the revolution. A couple of trips I've had to cancel because I couldn't get people together. But every time we've been there, it's been this fantastic situation of having the place empty. And once it gets recognized as being safe again, everybody will flood in and it will be like the Super Bowl again. So anybody interested in a trip, this is the time to do it. And I have 2 seats left on this Enneagram trip, which is about $1,000 more than the regular trip. But then I've got a regular trip coming up in March. That's not on my website yet, but it's there. It's March. How is it? March 12th to 25th to 26th.
Well, if anybody has any questions, certainly you'll talk to them directly, I'm sure.
Yeah. Email.
Yeah, right. Okay. So what if with now this is where I'm going to ask some direct questions, things that I need to know that I haven't that before you get off the show I want answered. With the Valley of the Kings.
Mm-hmm.
The pharaohs that are buried there. Okay, well, wait a minute. We know every pharaoh that has ever ruled in Egypt, correct? And there's a time stamp, and we have other things that with the Bible and so forth. But
Bible doesn't count.
Yeah. Well, let's not get religious. But we can account for every pharaoh and family, correct?
I think so.
Okay,
Yeah,
so. how many of those pharaohs are actually buried in the Valley of the Kings?
Only the New Kingdom pharaohs,
And-
which is like 1550 to 1070 or so BC. So I'm forgetting out the number 70 something.
Have we accounted for everybody?
All present and accounted for according to the inscriptions. And the great thing about Tutankhamun was that he was the one who wasn't accounted for, and they figured he had to be there somewhere. So Carter went on this incredible thing. 7 years he spent digging, finding nothing, and then just when they were about to give up, it's like a movie script.
Can you imagine? I mean, can you
Just
imagine?
when they're about to give up, he decides to look somewhere where he'd already dug, but he dug a little bit deeper, and suddenly there were stairs at the tomb of Ramses VI, which is actually a fantastic special tomb that we get. You get a special ticket for that we get on the trips. It's an unbelievable tomb. And the rubble that they pulled out from the tomb when they were cutting it above the Tutankhamun tomb obscured the entrance to Tutankhamun's tomb. And I've heard, I don't know if it's true, that the workmen knew this all along, but they didn't want to. They wanted to keep working. They wanted a job.
No, I heard the same thing, that they
tell
didn't
them
want to
until they
fire.
were-
Yeah, they didn't want to find it. They wanted to keep
they
getting
didn't
paid.
tell him until the very end when he knew he was going to give up.
So
That may be
on
true.
your
I don't know.
on your
Good story.
on your tour, do you go to every one of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings?
No, you can't possibly do that. You get tombed out anyway. No, we go to a few select. We go to a few select ones. No, you can't go to everything.
Now, what's
I mean,
the big one? KB. What's the big one?
No, there are a whole bunch of them. They're all KB, means Kings Valley.
Right.
One that is Schmuck. What's his name?
Oh, that yeah. Well,
Kent Weeks.
yeah, Kent Weeks.
Yeah, this is not open to the public, but it's of no interest to us. We go to a few of the ones that are, let's say, esoterically and artistically significant. And the one is the tomb of Ramses VI. And, when the place is crowded, it's a real problem because there's so many people in there and they can't take pictures and blah, blah, blah. Now it's a different story. But anyway, Ramses VI is the spectacular one, and you can get special permission, which we do. It's an extra ticket.
Is there anything left then to discover in the Valley of the Kings?
There might be. They're always discovering stuff. Only recently they've discovered a few things that are not royal tombs, but noble tombs. So, yeah, there's always stuff being discovered. Always. Everywhere.
Do you guys go to Luxor?
Of course. Yeah, well, Luxor, the Valley of the Kings is the west bank of Luxor.
Right.
Yeah, we go to everything. We go to virtually all of the really major sites.
Well, see, for this,
and in fact, we do. It's really, I've crafted this tour over, what have I started doing in '85? So it's almost 30 years I've been doing these things. Whittling it down, crafting it in such a way that you go to the best things. You can't do everything. Actually, the tour it's even the right length. You wouldn't even if people could afford it, which they can't, at least from Americans, they don't get the time off.
Right.
Europeans, where they're civilized, have 6 weeks of holiday. Not in this dumb country. But you really don't want more than the amount of time that we have.
Well, everybody thinks, including myself, that you think of the pyramids first, and you think of the Sphinx first, and deservedly so. But what for you? What is the highlight? What's the one thing that you just always blows your mind every time? Because you're there I can't imagine going to Giza 4 times a year, for as long as you have, and just learning and learning and learning. It just must be amazing.
Yeah, I do.
What's the one? What's the one thing that still blows your mind? There's got to be one thing.
No, there is no one thing. It's like, what's your favorite piece of music? It's probably a few pieces of music. So there are a number of things. And the reason that people always ask me this, how can you do this? How many times have you been there? 100. How can you, doesn't it get boring? No, it doesn't, because I always have a very interesting group of people with me, because if they weren't interesting people, they wouldn't want to be with me. I mean, this is serious stuff that we're doing.
But there's got to be one thing that, or a few things. So I want to know what they are. Give me three. I mean, where
the Sphinx, Luxor Temple, where Schwaller developed his symbolist theory. Abydos, where they have the fabulous artwork, almost perfect condition, and the Osirian behind it, this mysterious, probably very ancient structure that probably dates back to the earlier period. Philae Temple, which is late, and most of the artwork late is corrupted, but this is an Isis temple, and it has this wonderful, quintessentially divine femininity to it. It's fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
And Abu Simbel, with the huge, it's been moved, so it's not in its original place, but you'd never know it unless somebody told you, which I do. But
I have to ask you. I almost forgot the Dendera light bulb.
Oh yeah, the Dendera light.
Come on, talk to me, John. Is it a light bulb?
It's not a light bulb, and a helicopter is not a helicopter.
Well, that isn't. That isn't. That's
the light bulb is cosmology, and it has nothing to do with a light bulb. It's illustrating. It's in a crypt underneath, and it's kind of symbolizing the several stages of the creation of the universe. And when you're there, it's hard to do it in words without the pictures there. Even if you have the pictures, it's stage 1 and stage 2 of the creation of the universe, of the first energy, the first vibration coming out of the lotus flower in this what looks like a light bulb, but it's not. If it's a lotus, in other words, if you were a cartoonist and you wanted to portray a smell, how would you do it?
Well, but I wouldn't have a 12-foot long lotus flower either. I think that's, but
yeah, the lotus flower is the lotus flower grows out of.
I get that, but it certainly looks like a light bulb to me.
No, well, it isn't. It's the envelope of fragrance. In other words, the lotus has this psychedelic perfume that it emits, and what that is symbolizing is there's a word for it in Christian terminology. It's not the smell of sacredness.
But you're breaking a lot of ancient alien hearts out there right now by
Good.
Okay, Good. Including my own.
It is not. It is not a light bulb. And when you look at stage 1, and you see the symbolism, and you look at stage 2, and you see that it's different. It still has the envelope of fragrance, but everything that's going on in and around it is a second stage of creation. And
how do you explain the lack? How do you explain the lack of soot?
I don't know. I don't know how they did that.
Yeah, I know. You and I and everybody listening to this show has had to light a candle when the power has gone out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and we all know what that does to the ceiling of your house when you have to leave a candle lit for a couple hours.
Yeah, we don't know.
Okay. I scratch my head at that one.
LEDs.
but what?
They had good flashlights.
Exactly. When you go into the king's chamber and you're going up and down the stairs and you're around and up and this and you finally get into the king's chamber. Yeah. And if you don't have a flashlight, it's black, isn't it? I mean, there is no light in there.
They have lights in it.
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if not without electricity, there's nothing. There's no way you could see anything in the right. It's black. It's as black as anything.
Yeah.
Right.
It's black. Yeah.
Okay. So how did they get that? I don't know. I don't expect an answer. I'm just saying how.
It's easy with the pyramids. Because when they're building it, it's open to the skies, so there's no problem about that. When they're cutting, because they're building up, when they're cutting in a tomb, that's different because they're going underground,
right?
And they're going around corners and stuff like that,
right?
No, and then they're decorating it
and painting.
It's one thing to cut it, and then painting. No, nobody knows.
Yep. And carving those reliefs take an awful lot of time, and it's precise, beautiful,
Precise,
artwork.
and they don't make mistakes.
No mistakes. Exactly
No,
right.
it's amazing. I'm telling you, when you go there, I often use this image. I start lectures off generally by saying that Egypt is like sex. That gets everybody interested because everybody's interested in sex.
Right.
And they want to know, why is Egypt like sex? Well, it's because you can read a lot about it. That's kind of interesting. And you can look at pictures. That's maybe even more interesting. But until you've actually experienced it, you don't understand anything.
Well, I can tell you how they carved and painted inside of the Valley of the Kings.
How?
They had a light bulb from Dendera.
Light bulb from Dendera.
I mean, seriously, the more and all of I haven't been there, but all of the video that I have ever seen of the interior of not only the step pyramid, that's pretty mind blowing too. Let's not let that go. And what is inside of there, but the Valley of the Kings, when you look at what is truly there, with the painting as well as the carving, and the fact that this was done in the dark, that was lit up somehow, I just don't know how
well,
it was
I
done.
agree with you, except that the Dendera light bulb is cosmology, and when you look at the two stages, you see it in front of your nose.
No, I see it, but I just want to believe. You want
to believe. Vote Republican.
Okay, let's talk about. We've got a few more minutes. You want to take a break and come back and tell me exactly what Symbolist Egypt is, or do you just want to?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Or if you don't want to take a break, we can just ride out this next 15 minutes. It's up to you.
What's my vodka doing? I'll take a break for a minute.
Okay, so
1 minute.
Let's take a break for a couple of minutes. We will be
2
right
minutes.
back. Yeah, no. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. I'm watching John on camera walk out of the picture. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We're going to take a couple of minutes, come back and wrap this up with John Anthony West. Stay with us.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will. On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
He's always giving it to you straight.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
You're Tom, Brittany, Gabby, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church, the Dark Matter Radio Network. Shoot us an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Follow us on Twitter, which is @jchurchradio. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is Fade to Black. It is right there, Fade to Black. We've got some stuff up. We've tried to put up everything from the first month of shows. I think we have everything up there. We've still got a couple things we're going to get up, and of course tonight's show and tomorrow night's show as well. We'll get those up by the weekend. And coming up next will be Spooky South Coast with Tim Weisberg. And I would just want to continue. We've got another 10 minutes left in this last part of the show with John Anthony West, and I wanted to just take a few minutes out. We talked about so much tonight, John, and I really appreciate it, and I really look forward to this, and it met everything that I was expecting. But Symbolist Egypt, what is it exactly? We touched upon it a few times, but I just wanted to get it in there because everybody listening to the show right now is going to go off and do do their reading and investigating, through this great internet of ours, and that's one of the things that they probably heard, but we just didn't explain.
Okay. Symbolist Egypt, let's see if I can make it as simple as possible, is the interpretation developed by the genius with the unpronounceable name R.A. Schroller de Lubitsch, who was a remarkable character in his own right, a practicing alchemist, erudite, orientalist, philosopher, mathematician, who went to Egypt in 1937, basically looking to see if he could find the evidence that the Egyptians understood kind of Pythagorean mathematics and numerical symbolism. Anyway, he got there with his wife, and he ended up staying 15 years in the Temple of Luxor. And by the time he was done, he basically overthrew everything that the quackademics had put together about the knowledge of the ancient Egyptians. He proved that what they represented as a kind of genius, artistic, primitives who were artistic geniuses capable of producing all of these amazing temples and pyramids and artistry and so on. And Schroller basically proved that this was what he called a sacred science, a science based upon cosmic principles and the interplay of cosmic principles. And the gods themselves, the so-called gods that are always taken as polytheism, are not polytheism, but rather the embodiments of the cosmic principles that make our own lives comprehensible. For example, let's say the organic cosmic principles are fertilization, gestation, pregnancy in other words, birth, growth, maturity, old age, senescence, death, renewal. Those are cosmic principles. The quackademics, the modern Church of Progress, said, oh, well, that's just evolution, as if that suddenly explains everything. The Egyptians saw it quite otherwise. Each of those stages is a principle, and the principle, it's a god, as it were. And the principles are connected to particular, for good reason. Actually, I get into this in Serpent in the Sky. It's tough to do in 10 minutes. Actually, it's tough to do it. It's easy to do on a trip that takes 2 weeks, but it's hard to do in a couple of minutes. The principles are associated for good reason with particular numbers. The numbers taken together give rise to particular geometries, harmonies, measurements, and so on. When people who understand this sacred science are building a temple or consecrating a temple in, let's say, to honor, to embody that particular principle, you get a temple, you get what's effectively Goethe, the great German poet, called architecture frozen music. This is not a poetic metaphor. It's actually technically correct. So when you have the right numbers involved and the right geometry, and you're doing a temple to honor Osiris, let's say, who represents the principle of becoming and return, or you're doing a temple to honor, let's say, Hathor, who represents the great cosmic feminine, and you're using the right numbers and harmonies and so on, when you go into that temple, it's music, and you resonate to you as the participant, resonate to that particular temple. These are epiphanies. Every one of these temples is an epiphany. It's a religious experience, particularly if you get to see it by yourself without a million other tourists around. And in other words, it's exactly the opposite of what we have today. It is a science, but it connects us to the meaning of the universe and to the meaning of our own role within the great cosmic scheme. And
well, you know that for such an ancient society, we are not there today. That's the, you know what I mean. we're not there today with
No,
with ourselves.
We're at the opposite polar extreme. That's why it's so important.
That's exactly my point. And then when you have such an ancient society that wasn't supposed to know much about anything because knowledge wasn't learned yet. They hadn't learned that it's just fascinating to me that they were able to tie, like you're saying, mathematics and philosophy and the soul and right from wrong and immortality and build these great symbols of all of it. It's just fascinating to me. And here we are today, certainly 3 steps backwards from where they were then. It's unbelievable. Yeah. What do you expect? We've got about 3 or 4 minutes, so I just want to get a couple of more philosophical things out of you. What do you expect from all of the established orthodoxy out there day to day? What is it that you expect? I mean, is it always negative? Are you always fighting the good fight? I mean, what is it that you expect?
Not necessarily always negative. At a certain point, they get beaten into the ground. It's like a battering ram on a portcullis of an ivory tower. You keep hitting and hitting and hitting, and sooner or later, it breaks down. And then, at least if I'm there behind the battering ram, then there's a massacre.
Well, I'm standing beside you, fighting the good fight. Now, really quick. Robert Schoch, what have you guys got going on right now?
Well, we've got sort of our new nonprofit organization about to be realized to take care of, to look for funding to do the research. And then we've got between us a kind of a production company looking to do the follow-up to The Mystery of the Sphinx and our own couple of books. As I mentioned before, the one about the whole Sphinx theory, and the other one, the sort of the definitive anti-Darwin book that we're both very keen to do. So we've got lots of stuff, and I hope to live another. I have a friend who just turned 110, so I've got he's a good role model because I've got at 81. I don't know how much time I have left, but I've got a lot of work to do still.
No.
So
If he's 110, you and I have got 30, 50, 60 years left. So we're good to go there. But back with Robert,
yes.
With the Sphinx today, and again, I just want to. I should have asked a lot of these questions earlier, but where's the future with the Sphinx? If you want to do part 2, what's the reason to do a part 2? I mean, what needs to be said that hasn't?
Well, see, part 1 was only involving the Sphinx, and we have all of this other evidence from Egypt, and then there's Göbekli Tepe, and then there's all of this other work, and there's Gunung Padang that maybe comes into it.
Mm-hmm.
Schoch is really into it. He sees Easter Island as a big piece of the puzzle. So there's a ton of stuff out there that hasn't been broached at all. And in the earlier one, I didn't really get into the philosophy. The philosophy, really, we haven't mentioned this really, but the series, the Magical Egypt, the Symbolist Tour, the 8-episode DVD series is really the best. I think that's what interested you. It's the best introduction to Egypt, short of going there.
Right.
For those who can't afford.
Well, I would suggest to everybody out there, I will, and I know that my producers are listening to me right now, I will get some links up. We have to for the Magical Egypt DVD set because it's 7 hours long. It is no joke.
8 hours.
8 hours. You know what? I'm just going to say this right now. It seems like 20 because it is unbelievably informative. It's comprehensive. There's so much information there, but it's not the information. It's the type of information that is there. It's two different things. And you reel everybody in right from the first get-go at the beginning of the first DVD, and the way that you so I could go on about that.
Actually,
we
Jimmy,
could spend it. Go ahead.
Really, the brilliance of this is yes, I'm central to it with my ideas and so on, but the realization of it is my genius partner, Chance Gardner, who turned it into what it is. It's really, this is something special. It's hypnotic. And my suggestion is take a couple of tokes before you watch it.
Hey, do you think?
I'm serious.
Do you think
The whole thing becomes magical if you just get a little bit loose from your own
absolutely. Let me tell you something. I'm almost positive that Zahi Hawass sits at home and watches that by himself and doesn't tell anybody.
You know, he might.
I'm telling
as
you.
a personal friend, I'm going to be, I hope, be meeting Zahi on this next trip. And I have hopes for Zahi. Other people don't understand, but I think he could change.
Well, I know that there's some politics involved with that, and I don't want to get into that on this program, and I never will, because I do respect him. He's always he's got a lot of work that he deals with everything out there from all fronts. He really does, and then he's got guys like you that he has to deal with on a regular basis. But
that's another funny story. We didn't have time for that on this short 3 hours. But it's been another interesting story of how we got to be sort of actually friends, not just civil. That's an interesting story. You need another 3 hours somewhere along the line.
Okay. Well, listen.
Anyway,
we're up against it. We've got about 2 minutes left. Is there anything that you want? Are you speaking anywhere anytime soon, or is it just the trips?
I have no speaking engagements apart from the ARE, the Edgar Casey thing, and that's next October. Nothing coming up in the immediate future, but a couple of trips coming up, and that I want to fill up. And anybody, the Enneagram trip coming up immediately, the end of that has 2 seats left. Is anybody interested? This is a very special trip with this wonderful boat that we have, and blah blah.